Bom dia a todos. É um prazer muito grande receber nossos convidados, tanto os convidados de Goiânia, quanto os convidados do Brasil e de todas as partes do mundo. Sejam muito bem-vindos. Estar aqui abrindo esse evento junto com o professor Cleomar é uma alegria dupla, né? Primeiro, porque o Media Lab é um laboratório multiusuário que está vinculado à tecnologia de pesquisa e inovação. E segundo, que é sempre um prazer trabalhar junto com o professor Cleomar.
A gente não vai gravar não, tá? Não precisa fazer gravação simultânea não.
Né?
Na verdade era bom,
organizando e editando, eu acho que isso já demonstra.
Então deixa. Eu acho que ele não vai gravar. Não, é por isso que eu estou perguntando.
Trabalhando junto. E mais interessante ainda é quando todo esse esforço, né, é canalizado para um evento, né, usando, parafraseando suas palavras, né, muito orgulhante, que essa é por minha conta, né, mas acima de tudo produzindo fagulhas e movimento, né. E eu acho que é isso, a universidade ela tem que ser viva, as pessoas que a compõem têm que estar fazendo coisas novas todo dia, e o Media Lab é um exemplo disso, é um sonho acreditado pelo professor Cleomar, que sonhou na hora certa, no momento ideal, quando as condições ainda permitiam a gente, além de sonhar, executar no espaço de tempo de curto, uma estrutura como é o Media Lab, só que isso é só uma parte. Né? A segunda parte, o mais importante, é exatamente ele vai produzir, né, mais inovação, mais tecnologias e como a nossa colega falou aqui, né, vamos aprender, mas também vocês vão sempre conseguir se divertir, o que é muito bacana, né? Quando no processo de aprendizado, de transmissão do conhecimento, a gente também pode se divertir, a gente faz isso com mais prazer. Então sejam muito bem-vindos e que esse evento, né, atinja os objetivos a que ele se propõe.
Senhoras e senhores, muito bom dia. Prazer tê-los aqui no início de mais uma edição do nosso simpósio internacional. Deixa eu fingir para ele. Eu fiquei com medo de ficar nervoso. Eu gravei antes. Senhoras e senhores, muito bom dia. Prazer tê-los aqui no início de mais um. É verdade, eu devia ficar aqui, aí a gente teria o áudio e o vídeo. Eu acho que eu vou ter que partir para o improviso. Pode ser? Senhoras e senhores, muito bom dia. Prazer tê-los aqui no início de mais. Então vou pelo improviso mesmo. Eu não queria ter feito uma brincadeira com vídeo de eu falando comigo mesmo, mas enfim. Vai para o próximo. O próximo sim eu faço isso. Não era, mas não deu certo, eu conto, porque a gente já não fica pensando que teria alguma outra coisa. Bom, é um prazer recebê-los aqui mais uma edição do nosso Simpósio Internacional de Inovação e Mídias Interativas. Eu quero agradecer muitíssimo ao professor Florinda, que sempre nos apoiou na iniciativa do Media Lab. Como ela antecipou, o Media Lab é mais do que um sonho, é uma realização, e o SIIMI tem uma história bastante engraçada em relação ao próprio prédio do Media Lab. Alguns de vocês talvez saibam, mas para os que não sabem, eu vou contar então. Quando me prometeram a entrega do prédio do Media Lab, eu pensei em um evento internacional para inaugurar o nosso prédio. E no ano de 2012, nós realizamos a primeira edição desse simpósio. Naturalmente que na primeira edição a gente não estava com o prédio pronto. a segunda edição, ele não estava pronto ainda. Fizemos uma terceira edição e ele não estava pronto. Então, finalmente, na quarta edição, nós temos o prazer de ter o prédio do Media Lab pronto, já funcionando. Ele nos foi entregue no final do ano passado e as nossas atividades pela tarde já ocorrem também no prédio do Media Lab, que terá uma exposição, a primeira vez que o SIIMI acontece, contando também com uma exposição que ocupa o nosso espaço expositivo do Media Lab. Eu gostaria de agradecer muitíssimo os nossos sempre apoiadores, começo com o CIAR, que é um parceiro desde a primeira edição. Leonardo, obrigadíssimo, é um prazer trabalhar em conjunto com uma equipe tão boa que você mantém lá no CIAR. Também a CNPq e CAPES, nossos apoiadores oficiais, Red Bull, que está presente aqui para nos dar um pouquinho mais de ânimo e tem muito a ver com o tema desse ano, que é ignição. A Canal Futura, Samsung, FAPEG, TV UFG, enfim, são parceiros que se juntam ao grupo de programas de pós-graduação que nós temos articulação. Os programas de pós-graduação que são os fundadores das pesquisas no Media Lab são os programas de pós-graduação em arte e cultura visual, o programa de pós-graduação em ciências da computação, programa de pós-graduação em comunicação e programa de pós-graduação em música. Esses 4 programas, eles compõem o núcleo duro dos pesquisadores do Media Lab e são nossos alicerces enquanto estruturadores do núcleo de pesquisa que nós mantemos no Media Lab. Então eu quero agradecer vivamente o apoio irrestrito que esses programas têm dado e o compromisso que eles têm com as nossas pesquisas. Dizer que o Media Lab ele cresceu muitíssimo nos últimos anos, principalmente depois da entrega do prédio. Eu me lembro que a gente ficava tentando ainda manter o nosso arsenal em alguns cubículos ali na FAB e de repente a gente partiu para um prédio excelente e que fez com que a gente pôde implementar uma série de pesquisas. Temos agora uma série de outras articulações novas, talvez a mais recente tenha sido a entrega do novo projeto expográfico do Museu Casa de Coracoralina, na cidade de Goiás, cuja repercussão foi bastante interessante para a universidade. E nisso, o meu agradecimento especial ao seu empenho e toda a equipe do Media Lab, naturalmente. Mas o Hugo tem sido um parceiro forte com quem eu conto o tempo inteiro ali no Media Lab, assim como o professor Ravi, o professor Wagner, enfim. Gostaria de agradecer também os nossos convidados internacionais, professor Paul Heckert, thank you very much. Professor Harold, thank you. Gostaria de convidar, de agradecer ainda as pessoas que se deslocaram de estados para estarem aqui, então muitíssimo obrigado. E nós teremos 3 dias que para mim serão muito mais festivos do que de trabalho. Ontem a gente estava correndo, tentando organizar algumas coisas ali no Media Lab, e eu dizia, poxa, parece clima de organização de festa. Todo mundo correndo para dar conta de alguma coisa, mas sabendo que estaremos antes e acima de tudo entre amigos. E é assim que eu me sinto aqui com vocês. Estamos em casa, estamos entre amigos. Bem-vindos a mais uma edição do SIIMI. Eu vou pedir então ao professor Wagner Bandeira que nos apresente a primeira conferência. Devo advertir-vos que nós tivemos uma série de alterações na malha aérea nos últimos dias, nas últimas semanas, e isso impactou algumas das nossas programações. Então, na medida do possível, a gente vai informá-los das alterações havidas. Vocês têm um crachá, a programação completa. Todas as manhãs as nossas atividades serão aqui, nesse espaço. À tarde nós estaremos no prédio do Media Lab e aqui, e à noite a gente tem atividades no prédio do Media Lab. Assim, a próxima conferência será realizada em inglês. Nós temos tradução simultânea para quem precisar, está à disposição ali no sacola. Professor Wagner Bandeira, por favor. Bom dia. É uma grande honra ter o professor Paul Hackett aqui. Ele é professor titular de Teoria da Forma, líder do Departamento de Design Industrial da Universidade de Tecnologia de Delft, na Holanda. Paul dirige pesquisas sobre os modos como os produtos impactam a experiência e o comportamento humanos e lidera o projeto internacional UMA, Modelo Unificado de Estética. Ele tem publicado artigos que relacionam a experiência estética de produtos em importantes revistas científicas e é coeditor do livro A Experiência do Produto, de 2008. Também publicou o livro Visão e Design, um guia para inovadores, em 2011, um livro que descreve uma abordagem entre design e inovação. Paul é cofundador e membro da Sociedade de Design e Emoção, cuja conferência internacional estará em sua 10ª edição neste ano, em setembro, lá em Amsterdã, e é membro da mesa executiva do CRISP, Programa Científico da Indústria Criativa, uma iniciativa de pesquisa colaborativa para e com as indústrias criativas da Holanda. Seja muito bem-vindo, be welcome.
This one? Okay. Okay. Bom dia. That's the easy one, right? Well, it's a pleasure to be here in Koyama. I arrived last night, very late at night, so I have no idea where I am actually. It's pretty close to Brasilia, right? So somewhere in the Great Plains of Brazil. So yeah, I have to look it up on the map to find out where actually I am. But I'm in this room with your wonderful people, and maybe I have to slow down a little bit, or do I need to slow down a little bit? I'm a fast speaker, so, and I have many slides and many movies. Okay, thank you Wagner, thank you Media Lab for this invitation, and it's my pleasure to, in the next hour, show you some of my work which covers design, experience, products, media, interaction, pretty much everything you are interested in, and that will be covered at this conference. So I hope it will be interesting and also a little bit entertaining. When I was preparing my presentation on the very long flight from Amsterdam to Sao Paulo, that's the advantage of a long flight, right? I made up this title because Wagner said this would be interesting for this audience to talk about understanding the user or product experience more profoundly and how to design for it. So that's probably the thing I've been working on most over the last 20 years. And I made this slide. Now I have to get my remote. And then I thought, this looks so ugly, right? Do you see this title? The way it is put there? That's the word designing just passes the word experience. So I made the next version. This looks much better, right? You immediately feel that it looks better. And this kind of feeling, this very simple feeling that you have when you see the difference between this and this, is already important when you start to design products, interfaces, graphics, everything. So I would like to start talking about this in more depth now, and I want to start with a movie from a student in Delft.
For my graduation project at VU Delft, I developed a game which allows isolated children in child hospitals to play with their peers. Even though they are very ill, they don't always feel sick and they still feel a strong drive to play and explore, but they have no way of getting into contact with their peers at the hospital. It's called Connect, and it's a game they can play on the windows between their rooms and the hallways. So Connect is a set of ambiguous shapes that you can attach to the window using suction cups and magnets. And by combining the ambiguous shapes in different ways, you can play different kinds of games. So you can play existing games like tic-tac-toe, but you can also play chess, or you can build your own fantasy world. To test Connect, I placed it at the oncology department of the Dutch Child Hospital, and this is what happened. So what you see here is two girls having both them together, even though they are separated by a physical barrier. My ambition with Connect is to further optimize it and to produce it so it can actually be used in child hospitals.
Connect. There are a couple of reasons I show this movie to start off with. It helps me a lot to illustrate the kind of connections that I want to explain. But it is also a very nice example of a product that was initially starting off to become an interactive technological device. That's how the guy started off with. So he at first thought, I want to make some kind of interactive device for children in child hospitals, in oncology centers, to be able to connect to the outside world, and he ended up with a physical, non-technological game. And what this shows is that technology is not always the answer. It's a means to an end, and I hope that I will come back to that in the next half hour. So what we see in this movie is that it all starts with a set of product properties that the guy set out to work with. These are the kind of properties, these ambiguous shapes, as he calls them. The ambiguous shapes that are, and that's obvious, they are not predefined, they open up for various ways of usage, right? And as a result, kids start to interact with these ambiguous shapes in very different ways. They start to play with them, they start to explore them, they start to make games with them, they start to create a fantasy world with them. And that's, of course, wonderful. And this is the kind of user experience that we have been looking at for many years now. And you have seen, and that's why I also show the movie, you've seen the faces and the sounds that the kids make while playing with these shapes. And that says a lot about how they experience the device, the game. But ultimately, this product is not about the experience as such, and that's what I want to emphasize. The experience as such is wonderful, it's great, it's nice that they have a good time, but ultimately, there's an experiential long-term effect that this designer was aiming for. And that effect was social cohesion. To make the kids feel socially connected to the outside world, to other kids. And that was the ultimate purpose. So this is what it was ultimately about. The connection between the outside world and the inside world. To make the kids feel part of the rest of the world and not isolated in their hospital situation. More and more we see designers and design researchers like myself looking at these kind of longer term effects, products, and the interaction and the experience we have with these products on these long-term experiences in terms of well-being, happiness, but also in terms of our behavior and our attitudes. And I will talk about that later. What I want to show now is that it's all about designing ultimately is all about reasoning from this top to this bottom. And of course, we all know that you can start to explore and prototype and tinker with materials, with interactive devices in order to get to a quality at this higher level. But in my view, designing should first and foremost always start with a particular view on what you want to offer society, what you want to offer people, what kind of quality of life do you want to foster, and then reason all the way down through these levels to a product with properties. That's very much the design approach that we advocate in our design method that we have been developing over the years, which is all laid out in this beautiful pink book. It's called the VIP approach. And this is basically the model that we use this approach. And in this model, we teach our students, we teach the designers to reason from a future context, from a future world, all the way down via the interaction, via the experience, all the way down to a product with its properties. And a crucial stage in this process is, of course, when you have a particular interaction / experience in mind that you want to aim for, how do you translate that into a product with all its properties? The first part of my talk will mainly be about this transition from the how to the what. And next, I will talk a little bit about the reasoning from the why, the top level, all the way down. So, another example from the Netherlands. This is one of the, we are a bike country, right? We do a lot of biking. And this is one of the bikes that was designed a couple of years ago by some old students from our school, the Van Moof bike. And it's a very typical bike, or it's maybe not so typical bike. It's a rather atypical bike because it has a couple of features that are exciting. It has a couple of features or properties that are interesting and novel and that serve a purpose. And the purpose is laid down in this, you could say, advert. It is simplistic, it is a simple bike, it is a very stylish bike, it is a very light bike, it's made of aluminium, and it is designed in such a way, and there's the experiential goal that the designers set out for themselves. It is designed in such a way that it makes you go to work whistling. Isn't that beautiful? A bike that makes you go to work whistling. For all these years you have been going to work feeling so bad and sad, and now you go to work whistling because of the bike. That's beautiful, isn't it? So, we recently wrote a chapter for this book, the Materials Experience book. I don't know if you've seen it already. It was edited by someone from Delft, and someone from the UK and Italy. And this whole book is about how material qualities can and should be experienced. And in this book, we give a list. I wrote one of the chapters for this book, the opening chapter, and we talked about particular aspects of the experience that you should take into account when you design for an experience or for a material experience. First of all, experiences are inherently subjective. We all know that. But very often the way we talk about them, we do not acknowledge that. Experiences are within us. We experience something when interacting with devices, products, and people, of course. Okay? Secondly, the product or the user experiences, and I use them interchangeably. We rather talk about product experience because it's the product that you experience, and that's the thing we are interested in. But of course, we know that in the human-computer interaction world, it's all about user experience, which is pretty much the same notion, the same phenomenon. They arise in the interaction. So, the interaction should be understood very broadly. That could be physical interaction, but it could also be very passive type of interaction, just looking at the product or just thinking about a product could already lead to an experience. Thirdly, experiences are affected by both personal and situational factors. Of course, the product does a lot of it, But we always need to understand that the experience comes about as a result of what you bring into the situation, your background, everything you know, your expectations, your biases, your attitude, whatever, and the situation in which you have the experience. In the book I give an example of a particular drink that's very popular in Turkey, the raki. Maybe you know it. When you are at a terrace in Turkey drinking a raki, it feels like it's a perfect experience. It's perfect for the situation. But then you buy a bottle, you go home, and then you drink a raki and you think, why didn't I drink this shit back there in Turkey? That's what happens a lot. The experience, you cannot just bring the one experience you have in a particular situation into another situation. And finally, experiences develop or change over time. So they're not static. They change as a result of repeated experiences. The more you experience something, the better you start to get attached or detached from the object, from the thing you are experiencing, and you bring a lot of personal aspects into that change. Nevertheless, so if you look at this list, you think, oh my God, how can I ever design for an experience, right? How can I design something with all its properties and features that makes me go to work whistling, or that gives me this social connection, or make me build a fantasy world? Well, luckily, and that's probably the main message of my talk, underlying all this subjectivity, underlying all this circumstantiality, underlying all these variations that we see in how people from all over the place, from all different cultures, from all different worlds experience stuff, technology, there are commonalities. There are universal laws underlying these experiences. And in our research we have set out a task to find these underlying mechanisms. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's from Franz Boas. Franz Boas was a cultural anthropologist who traveled around the world to study different cultures. And as you may know, if you have a little bit of understanding of cultural anthropology, cultural anthropologists are always looking for differences. They are looking for differences between cultures. And Franz Boas was no exception. He was the founding father of this discipline, the scientific discipline, and he was also a cultural relativist, as they call it. Nevertheless, in this quote he acknowledges that there are a lot of similarities in thought and action among the most diverse people. So even though we see all these differences, there are a lot of similarities among people, and these similarities are detailed, far-reaching, and related to many subjects. And this brings me to a model that I've been using over the many years that we did our research, where I have made a claim, we have made a claim, that in order to profoundly understand why a particular person in a particular situation at a particular point in time experiences technology or an interactive device or any product the way he or she does, you first and foremost have to understand the universal patterns and mechanisms that are underlying that experience. And these universal mechanisms or patterns are culture and individual independence. They all have to do with the way we people are. And that's why I always like to give this talk, these kind of talks, so much in totally different worlds, in totally different cultures, like now in Brazil. Somehow, I believe I can resonate with people in Brazil as much as I resonated a month ago when I was in Korea giving a similar talk. And they understood what I was saying, because we speak a universal human language where we all understand each other, I hope. Okay, I'm not alone in this. So there are many people in psychology, and especially a branch of psychology called evolutionary psychology, that have a similar view on human nature. And Steven Pinker is one of the most important advocates of this stream. And I also like this quote. I have a couple of quotes in my presentation, I hope you don't mind, but this is one of my favorite ones, where he says, despite all these, well, the moral is that familiar categories of behavior, like all the customs that we have around marriage, the food taboos or folk superstitions and so on, they certainly vary across cultures and have to be learned, but the deeper mechanisms of mental computation that generate them, maybe he says, but he wants to say, are universal and innate. And that has always also been the starting point of this book that we published almost 10 years ago already, where we made this distinction between the three components of a user experience. Probably some people in the room are familiar with this division that we made between an aesthetic experience, or the aesthetic side of the experience, the semantic or meaning experience, or the meaning in the experience, and the emotional part of the experience. And the reason I use such a lengthy introduction about human nature is that the reason we can make this distinction is that we believe, and we have shown, that these three types or these three components of the experience do have a different underlying mechanism. And you have to understand that mechanism in order to see the differences. And of course, I'm the first to say that in our daily experience of a work of art, of a car, of an internet browser, or whatever, these three types or these three components of the experience are completely mixed up. They are completely, they fuel each other, they influence each other, and they are very difficult to decompose in your personal experience. But as a researcher, as a scientist, we need to do that in order to understand them properly and to be able to teach designers how to deal with them. So that's what we have been doing over many years, and I will take you through a little journey of what we have been looking at. First of all, the part of aesthetics. And if you talk about aesthetics, you always have to explain what you talk about when you talk about aesthetics, because aesthetics is a word that is as popular as elusive. It goes all the ways, and people have all kinds of notions when you start to talk about aesthetics. So, interestingly, and now stay seated, please. When you go to the internet, on an internet browser, and you look for something like Japanese aesthetics, you get this. Okay? You get expressions, designs, houses, landscapes, gardens that Japanese people find visually very appealing, attractive, part of their culture probably, and that somehow give an image of how Japanese feel about organizing their environment and products within. Okay? So I did the same last night at Sao Paulo airport for Brazilian aesthetics. And this is what you get. I didn't fake this. I'm so sorry. But I know it's funny, but it also makes the point that when you talk about aesthetics, you can talk about many different things, right? And probably in Brazil, the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about aesthetics is about the human form and how you can manipulate it. Okay. In our research on aesthetics, and that has a lot to do with the fact that we are researching aesthetics in the context of design objects. And in the context of design objects, we do not talk about art as such. We talk about the kind of aesthetic reactions people have to everyday objects. And these kind of aesthetic reactions can be captured by the notion of aesthetic pleasure. Okay? So when it comes to the aesthetic pleasure that people have, the pleasure that people attain from just watching an object or feeling an object or listening to an object. In that sense, the aesthetic response of people to designed objects is similar as the aesthetic response to art objects. And of course, I'm again the first to admit that when you consider aesthetic reactions to art, there's much more than this aesthetic pleasure. But nevertheless, when it comes to this aesthetic pleasure, in the most basic sense, senses Dennis Dutton, for example, has defined it in his book, The Art Instinct, where it's the pleasure that people derive from processing the objects, the artwork, the human form, the product, for its own sake, and that's very important, as a source of immediate experiential pleasure in itself, and not essentially for its utility in producing something else that is either useful or pleasurable. So we like the shape, the form of this coffee cup, not for the fact that it keeps the coffee warm, or not for the fact, maybe also not for the status it provides us, but just for the way that it's composed, its dimensions, all the features it has. Okay? In that sense, you can have aesthetic pleasure towards anything, such as the goal that Van Persie made at the World Cup in Brazil a couple of years ago in the first match against Spain. Right? We are still in the Netherlands. We still think this is the most important goal that was ever made, because that broke up the whole situation that the team was in, and now we overruled Spain and we made it to the semi-finals. And somewhere we met Brazil as well. Okay, sorry for that. So, in that sense, we can also have aesthetic pleasure towards people, right? We can admire people aesthetically for the way they look. And the important thing to understand here is that the mechanism, the underlying mechanism that explains why we are aesthetically attracted to people, and I will not go into the details about this, but there's a whole body of literature. I made a little count a little while ago. 90% of the research in aesthetics is about human beauty. It's about beautiful form. It's about teeth. It's about faces. It's about the body. Why females prefer particular male characteristics and males prefer female characteristics. And most of it has a very basic underlying logic, in the sense that we like those features of men and women that signal that there is survival value in there. So we like those features that signal that women are capable of producing offspring, as we call it, kids, and for men that they can protect the offspring. So all those features that signal those survival qualities we like. So that's the logic underlying human beauty. And that leads to a very universal, we have to understand, a very universal type of liking. Despite all the differences, here we go again, despite all the differences, people all around the world have a pretty much similar notion of what they like in other people. So, for example, there's a beautiful experiment where they asked Japanese people, Japanese men, to rate a set of Japanese women on their beauty, and then they brought the same set to Europe, where we are Caucasians. And the Caucasians exactly lined up the Japanese women in the way the Japanese men did. So there's a lot of cross-cultural consistency in our preferences. Okay, so far about human beauty. But then, what about the tools that we are making? Right? We designers, we artists, we are tool makers, ultimately. And these are one of the very first tools that were produced some 2.5 million years ago. 2.5 million years ago, we started to make tools. So we humans, we are on this planet for about 5 million years, and about half of our lives we have done without tools, and half of our lives, 2.5 million years ago, we started to produce tools. That's about 80,000 generations back, okay? and mainly to understand our aesthetic response to tools, to the things we make in general. Oh my God, we have a problem that needs to close. Oh no, what's going on? I'm so sorry for this. Oh, it opens again. Maybe we should plug in the power. Yeah, we'll start with it. Sorry for this. Okay, it was not a long delay. Yeah, it works. Yeah, thank you. So, to make a long story short, I can talk about this for hours. The most plausible hypothesis explaining why we like aesthetically, for its own sake, to engage with products, with tools, is what we call the byproduct hypothesis. So essentially it is saying that our liking of tools is not an adaptation as such as it is with the liking of people, which has an immediate survival benefit, as I hope I just explained. When it comes to the liking of artifacts, it's a byproduct of the way our sensory systems, including our brain, have evolved over those couple of million years of evolution. Okay? Our brains, and including our sensory systems, our visual system, our cognitive system, our auditory system, our gustatory system, our tactile system, have evolved over those million years of evolution to serve a purpose. And that purpose is to understand the world. To understand the world, to make sure that you don't make mistakes, to identify objects that are edible, to make sure that you don't run into a tree, to recognize things. Our systems have evolved to make us function as properly as we do today. And all of us without any impairments, although this is an impairment as well, right? Glasses or bad eyesight. As soon as if one of these systems starts to malfunction, we understand how important these systems are. Then we realize, hey, it's not that easy to recognize an object if you have a particular form of agnosia, or it's not that easy to see what is behind that because I cannot see it. I do not have depth sight, for example. So these systems are extremely important to understand the world around us, and the claim that the byproduct hypothesis make, and I'm one of the advocates of this hypothesis, is that we like things, we like those cues in the environment that are beneficial for these systems. So we like the cues, we like the patterns in the environment that help us function properly, which brings aesthetic pleasure very close to usability, which brings aesthetic pleasure very close to helping people to do the right thing. Okay? So we go back to this model and this reasoning from top to bottom. The first thing that helps us to understand products in an aesthetic sense is to look at the relationship between the way the product is designed and the purpose for which it is designed. To see the relationship between the purpose and the means. And this relationship is captured by, I come to the law in a minute. I just give you two examples. this is a garbage bag that was designed by one of our students some years ago. And it's not this is the ordinary garbage bag that we have in the Netherlands. This student designed this garbage bag for this reason. It's a transparent bag for things that are no longer used but are still in good condition. It was designed with the aim of enabling people to be generous towards strangers. So for that reason, it's higher quality material, it's transparent bag, it's very visible through the yellow striping, by which it attracts people to explore what's in the bag and see if there's anything in it that you might find useful. Okay? Another example. This is an app for a smartphone that was deliberately designed for people with a psychosis. It's an app for psychotic patients who are troubled by disturbing voices in their head, and the word game that you can play on the app activates the same brain area and thereby interferes with these voices. We are now in the test stage, but it works perfectly. So these people with the psychosis, I hope there's no one in the audience, but we all sometimes have voices in our head, right? When you play this word game, it starts to interfere with the same brain area where these words are generated, and these horrible words for psychotic patients, these voices are often saying horrible things to them, they disappear. And that's a great advantage for these patients. So this relationship between the purpose and the means, seeing that relationship is an aesthetic experience in and of itself. And that experience is captured by this law, the law of maximum effect for minimum means. We aesthetically appreciate a product that has a minimal design in various ways. You can conceptualize minimal in various ways. In this case, it's minimal material or minimal principle that is applied to this face. This is a face that slowly starts to tilt when it runs dry of water. So it indicates in a physical sense, that it has to be wobbled. This law of maximum effect for minimum means can explain aesthetic phenomena in all kinds of domains, in architecture, in language, in chess, in science. So it says that a scientific law is aesthetically pleasing, or a particular principle is aesthetically pleasing when it uses only a few parameters, for example, to explain a wealth of phenomena. Okay? So you can apply it to literally anything in the world. So this is and the reason underlying this aesthetic phenomenon is, of course, a very universal and functional one. It basically says we like things, in a very simplistic way, we like things that are very efficient for their purpose. We like efficiency. And from a brain perspective, that makes a lot of sense, because our brain has a limited capacity. We have big brains, but they are still limited, right? And for the brain, it is beneficial. It serves a purpose if it can do a lot with a little. And that's what this law basically explains. We have, over the last couple of years, we have done a lot of experiments on this law, where we have looked at, for example, a range of products that we manipulated as to the purpose for which they were designed. So we gave different purposes. So now we get a little bit into the experiments that we do, and we have shown very clearly that there's a very strong linear relation between the degree to which the product is seen as a minimal way to achieve that effect and the aesthetic pleasingness that people voice towards the product. So that was the first principle. The second principle I want to discuss very briefly is one that we have been studying more than 10 years ago already, which is called most advanced yet acceptable, or the Manhã principle. And the Manhã principle basically says that we like things that are, on the one hand, typical, but at the same time, and that's the important thing, at the same time novel or original, that are typical and novel simultaneously. We did a lot of experiments with all kinds of products, And we repeatedly, and not only we, but all kind of people all over the world have been testing this same principle now. And we always find this inverted, this curvilinear relation between typicality and novelty, where those products that maximize novelty and typicality at the same time are the ones that are aesthetically preferred. And I want to show this again to make my point. My point is that this law, or this principle, is universal. This principle we can find in Korea, in Brazil, and in the Netherlands, and wherever we will test it. I'm sure we will. You can try it out tomorrow and you will find that those products, in a particular range of products, that maximize typicality or familiarity and novelty are the ones that are aesthetically most preferred. However, when I would do an experiment in the Netherlands with cars, and I would do the same experiment in Brazil with cars, probably the cars that are here in Brazil are different cars than the ones in the Netherlands, because Brazilian people have a different notion of what is typical and novel than the Dutch people. Probably, most likely. Because in different cultures you are exposed to different types of cars. Yeah, some cars are on the Dutch market but not on the Brazilian market, and it's vice versa. So you will see differences between countries, cultures, but even between individuals. Because what is typical for me may not be typical for Wagner, and what's novel for me may not be typical for Wagner. But still, the underlying mechanism that these evolutionary psychologists talk about is a universal one, and can be explained on the basis of the fact that it is beneficial for people to stick to the things they know, the typical, what they are familiar with. So go back to this caveman 3 million years ago, who was in this cave. When he limited himself to the things he already knew, to eat, to expose himself to, he was safe, right? Yet, if he only did this and never get out of his cave, he will never explore new territory, new things to eat, for example. So he also has to explore the novel. So there is a clear logic that makes us both want to find the typical and the novel at the same time. And I think, and I believe that aesthetics is very much about bringing these two opposing drivers together. So bring, in this case, the typical and the novel together. Oh, it's goes again. What's going on? I think this is a cultural effect. Ja, dat is oké. We have all day, I hope. using that. Then I lose the move, right? Oh, there it goes. Come on. Nope, you can't reject it. No, it's yeah, it takes a little time to start moving. All the time we were reading these stories, Almost there. Yeah. Yay! Now we have to go. I'm so sorry, we switched computers and we had to move the whole presentation to the other computer. Let's hope it will work now. I really apologize for this inconvenience, and I will take you through some parts of the presentation for the last about 15 minutes. Okay? The third law that I was planning to discuss, but maybe we have to skip this one, is the law of unity and variety. But that's probably a law that is familiar to all of you. Unity and variety is, again, a principle that can be explained on the basis of the underlying mechanism that can lead to differences between people, but also lead to a lot of inter-individual commonalities. I shouldn't talk too quickly. And again, we have been looking at this relationship in experiments over the last couple of years. For example, with car dashboards, and we see that those car dashboards that maximize unity while allowing a lot of variety are the ones that are aesthetically most preferred. And we, for example, experimentally, and I like to show this because it gives you an idea of what kind of studies we do with the graphic layout of new websites, of new web pages. So here you see the differences that we made in terms of manipulating the unity and variety on the basis of things like symmetry, alignment, parallelism, number of colors that were applied. So you see the differences, right? And we also did it recently in the textual domain. So we looked, for example, at car keys, and again, also, and that is a very good sign of the universality or the interchangeability of the senses, that even in the tactile domain, we prefer those car keys that maximize novelty, unity and variety at the same time. So in a textual sense. And we have also been exploring this, let's say, systematically, where we try to systematically vary the level of unity, textual unity and variety in the key. This brings to the next level. So one of the ways to create unity, apart from all these Gestalt laws like symmetry and continuity and similarity of form or shape, there's also something like conceptual unity or conceptual relationships. So that's what a metaphor is about. And we like metaphors in products in general because they make a conceptual relation between one thing and the other. In the case of this toilet brush that was designed by Philip Stark, it's not an ordinary toilet brush, no, it's a toilet brush that allows you to attack the dirt in your toilet. And that's why it's called Excalibur, the king, the sword of King Arthur, that helps you to attack the shit in your toilet, right? So now we talk about meaning. Now we talk about meaning that is added to a product, that is projected onto a product, that is attributed to a product. And we do that all the time. This lamp, just by its sheer size, has a different meaning for this person than when it would be a normal desk lamp. And this was a nice example that I found some years ago from a patent by Apple, where they said, we patent the idea that files are metaphorically poured out of a device. So the idea is that you can take your smartphone and then pour the files into your computer. And that's a very metaphorical gesture, isn't it? And the metaphorical gesture is one, and this is one that we universally understand. And why do we universally understand this? Because we all know what pouring is. We all have an understanding of what it is to pour water out of a jug. And this is because this is based on, let's say, universal embodied projections. So I gave a couple of examples here of these kind of embodied projections. So warm temperatures are more pleasant than cold ones. So we see a warm person as more inviting and open. And you can find many of these examples in books on linguistics, where they show that there's a sort of a universal understanding of meaning in language. And we have tried and tested that with products as well. So could we design a water jug that is on the one hand universally understood as introvert or secure, one that is proud and impressive, and one that is firm and controlled, just by applying these embodied patterns on the water jug. And indeed, and this is one of the studies that we did many years ago, but I'd like to show because we not only studied it in the Netherlands, we also studied it in Brazil. We collaborated with a group in Rio de Janeiro at the time, and they used the same material to test it on Brazilian subjects, and we found exactly the same results. It has all been published. You can find it back in one of our publications. So the water drop, we universally understand this Lady G bottle opener from Alessi, right? That is a facial person, and it has been designed that way. But what about this one? This one is designed by Jesper Morrison, also for Alessi, and this is called the Socrates bottle opener. And now it becomes more tricky, because this is no longer, let's say, a universal quality that everybody understands. It's not an embodied quality, it's a cultural quality. You have to know a little bit about Socrates, the old Greek philosopher, and the way he made people engage into Socratic dialogues to understand properly, to understand this bottle opener. Jesper Morrison wanted us to have a Socratic dialogue with the bottle of wine that we are about to open. And of course there are many, I'm so happy the movie works, so I can keep on talking. There are many cultural metaphors, or metaphors that can only be understood if you understand the reference that has been made there. In this case, there's made a reference in the way you navigate this website to the panels they use in the basement of musea to store the paintings. And when you navigate through the paintings in the basement, you do it the same thing on this website, where you navigate the pages one by one. We probably universally understand the canoeing qualities of a beaver that helps you to sharpen your pencil. What we recently showed in a couple of experiments is that you can also use the same laws of aesthetics that we discussed earlier to understand the appreciation or the liking, the aesthetic pleasure that is coming from understanding a metaphor. So we like metaphors that are not, on the one hand, identifiable. This is a USB stick that glows when there is more information on it. Okay, that's an embodied metaphor again. When there's more in something, in the bag, it grows, right? That's embodied in an embodied way represented here. This one is more cultural, right? You have to understand what a scent, now I lost the word.
Hourglass.
Hourglass. What an hourglass is to understand that when this light will turn red. Okay? And again, we experimented with this, with all kind of, where we, for example, made a USB stick that is fortified, that fortifies the information that's on the stick. And we played with the dimensions of, on the one hand, subtlety and identifiability. So on the one hand, the metaphorical projection needs to be identifiable. You need to see what kind of reference is made, but at the same time you want to do it as subtle as possible, not too much in the face, okay? And that's a trade-off. Again, there's a trade-off. And all these aesthetic experiences are about trade-offs. I will skip this part about new materials. Do you like to see this? This is a project that we are working on, a European project. It's called Light Touch Matter, where we are experimenting with new material composites that have a couple of layers, a tactile top layer that is touch sensitive, OLED with color effects that emit light. And these kind of material composites that we see more and more on the market today pose a lot of new possibilities, opportunities for designers to play with. And these kind of materials do not have a meaning yet, and that was the reason I showed it here. And the meaning has to be given to the objects. Does this movie work as well? This is a project of one of the student group that was asked to design a new meaning for people with this kind of material. Takes a little while, this movie, but I will show you the essence. So, it starts off as an ordinary yoga mat. Who in the audience does yoga on a regular basis? Quite a few people. Okay. You will immediately recognize what's going on here. The yoga mat is touch sensitive and it recognizes your movements. So it recognizes where you put your hands, where you should put your hands, and it gives you light feedback on the appropriateness of the body posture that you take. Okay, I would like to move on with a few words about emotions. So products evoke emotions, right? Not only products that are deliberately designed for them, such as this one. This is an alarm clock that was deliberately designed to evoke emotions in the user. It's an alarm clock that at the set time, at the time that you put it, that you set it, it starts to randomly call people on your smartphone, so your friends and relatives. So this is particularly designed to make you feel embarrassed, probably, towards your friends. So you may know this model from Peter de Smet that we developed years ago, and again I want to stress one thing. It shows how product emotions, or emotions in general, are evoked. And what it shows is that an emotion is always the result of a person having particular concerns, having particular expectations, particular standards, and an object, anything that has particular qualities. And the object has to be interpreted in relation to your concerns. So, if the object is appraised as being beneficial to your concerns, as feeling your concerns, you will have some kind of positive emotion. When it violates your concerns, you will have some kind of negative emotion. So this model, this theory about emotion, how emotions come about, is a universal one. Yet it explains very well why and when people start to differ as it comes to their emotional responses. Because we do not always have the same concerns. We can have many different concerns at different times, and that can also differ culturally. The objects can be interpreted in different ways, and as a result, different emotional responses come about. But when we are in a presentation and showing a PowerPoint presentation, and the PowerPoint for some reason fails to work properly, we all are upset, right? We all are disappointed by the system, because we all have the same concern, and the response to that system is the system does not work what it is supposed to do, and I feel embarrassed to this audience, but the system is not working, and we all have the same response. So when you were here, standing where I am now, having that situation, you would have had the same response, I think. Recently we've been exploring what we can do with negative emotions. So generally, all the companies we have worked for and all the companies that are engaging into, let's say, experiential design, are always looking for the wow emotions, or how can we make people happy with our products. They're always looking for the positive. And we have recently been exploring the potential of the negative emotions, because we feel the negative emotions have been highly underrated and underused in product design, whereas they are highly valued and used in the arts. When you go to a theater play, when you go to the movies, you engage yourself into negative emotions, right? You go to horror movies or thrillers to feel the fear that the protagonist in the movie is feeling. You go to roller coasters to feel the fear of this high speed and everything that has been going on to your body. Yet in product design we always aim for the positive. And why do we engage in these kind of negative emotional situations? We do that because although we feel the fear and the arousal that comes with it, at the same time we know that we are safe. So as we call it technically, the emotion is framed in a protective way. We know literally almost that we are safe by the handlebar in the roller coaster. Yet we do feel the same fear as when there would be no handlebar. So this is one of the concepts that was designed by Stephen Fortinga. And basically what this does is help you run longer and faster. So it gives you the feeling that some kind of monster is chasing you through all kind of auditory and tactile feedback. It evokes the fear that you would normally have when a real monster is behind you, but at the same time you know that it is not a real one. But it works that way, and we have been testing it and it works perfectly. So, back to this model that I've shown before, we have seen that product interaction leads to all kinds of experiential effects in terms of aesthetics, emotions, and meaning. And again, these will ultimately contribute to what people do, run faster and longer, how they experience in the long run, the kind of happiness or well-being they feel, and maybe even it will change their attitudes to things around us. And ultimately, that will have an impact on the quality of life in society. And I was aiming to use the last 50 minutes of my talk to talk about these longer term effects and how to design for them, but I'm afraid we don't have that time, do we? So tell me, how much more time do I have? 5 minutes. Shall we do it quickly? Just to give you a glimpse? Okay. This was the promotion of the Design and Emotion Conference that we will have the 10th anniversary edition this year in Amsterdam. So, we do not only deliberately design long-term well-being and happiness, social inclusion, but we also more and more see design as a way to promote particular behavior that we think is good for people and society. Okay? This is a very nice example, I think, very simple. We see them all around our country, and probably there are also many in Brazil nowadays. The countdown at the traffic light. The countdown at the traffic light takes away your anxiety, and as a result, you start to change your behavior and you stop more often at traffic lights. It really works. It's so simple, but it works perfectly. And it changes our society, our inner city life. It makes traffic more pleasant and less chaotic. in the long run, design can also change your standards or your attitude. This is a web platform called Peri that's probably coming to Brazil at some stage. Maybe you have something similar here already, that allows people to share stuff with other people. It's demand driven, so when you need, for example, a sewing machine, you tell the system that you need a sewing machine, and the system will ask around in your neighborhood who has one that you can borrow. Okay? That's beautiful, that's helpful, that's a nice experience, but ultimately the designer of this system, the person behind the system, and I personally know him, he has a much bigger aim. He wants to change our sense of ownership. He wants to change our attitude towards possessing all kind of stuff, and instead fuel a sharing economy where we share cars instead of all driving our own car as we do now. And ultimately it may contribute to having less plastic in the ocean. We have been designing this world, and we have to realize that. And I'm becoming more and more an ethical designer or a moralist or a politician these days, because I realize that these are the kind of worlds that we have been designing by creating all these great user experiences. It is a great user experience to have a car and own a car and drive a car, but if we all drive a car, then we get a world like this. It's a great user experience to have a new packaging of whatever you buy. When I bought this one recently, there was a whole plastic packaging surrounding it, and this is the result. This is what we design, right? We design the fast food change where you can easily from your car order your hamburger and stay in your car, and as a result you have a meal that is not good for your health, and you're not challenged to exercise anymore. You can just stay in your car to get your stuff. And this is the kind of research that we are currently working on, how to deal with these kind of dilemmas as a designer, how to overcome these dilemmas. And this is another model that we have developed where we show that all these dilemmas that we are facing nowadays that result in the fact that we do not live in a perfect world have to do with the fact that there are conflicts between concerns. There are conflicts between your immediate short-term concern, I want to eat something, and your long-term concern of personal health. There are conflicts between your personal concerns, the things that you need and you want, and what we as a society should aim for or want to aim for, your collective concerns. And we have come up with a couple of strategies to deal with these concerns that can be summarized as resolve, bypass, and transform. And I will show you a couple of examples. So this particular countdown that I already showed you helps you to resolve the problem. It takes away the anxiety, and therefore you stop at the traffic light. This is from one of our students who graduated last year, who wanted to design something that helps people to live in line with their attitudes toward meat consumption. In the Netherlands, it's a big thing. I'm not sure. I heard that Goiânia is a place that's very popular for its meat consumption. So this is a long stretch for this particular city, maybe, or this region. But in the Netherlands, when you ask people, 90% of the people in the Netherlands would say in a questionnaire that they want to eat less meat, and if they eat meat, that they want to eat organic meat. That's what they say. 20% of the people really doesn't. There's a big gap between what people say they want to do and what people actually do. And that has a lot to do with the price, of course. Because once they enter the supermarket, it's all there, the cheap chicken and the cheap pork, and they are easily seduced to act not in accordance with their attitudes. What this student designed was a particular system that helps you to live up to your standards by making this decision about the kind of meat that you want to eat and the kind of production of meat that you want to choose already up front at home on your computer. So you you take a subscription for a particular type of meat production in terms of sustainability and animal well-being, and then in the supermarket all the meat that you can choose is at the same price. So the price difference you already paid up front, so you don't have that dilemma in the shop anymore. Another popular way to deal with these dilemmas is what we call the bypass strategy, or doing the right thing for the wrong reason. Let me show you a movie so this one is a project that we recently did in the CRISP program on designing for dementia, for people who are suffering from Alzheimer and dementia. 90% of elderly people at some stage have this problem, and it leads to physical passivity, and this is a way to make them play and exercise again in a very simple way. So the system projects all kind of images on a normal tabletop, and the elderly people are seduced to play with them, and you see what happens. And the playing is what they're interested in. They're not interested in the physical exercise as such. So they do the right thing, physically exercising, but for the wrong reason, to have a playful time. But that's fine. I mean, we bypass that problem. It's clear, right? And finally, butterflies. We have 70 different animals that we project there. You can transform the dilemma. This is a light switch that is out of balance when the light is on. So you are triggered to put it in balance again and thereby save energy and put off the light. This is another example of transforming the problem from a big problem of safety on the road to a very understandable problem of what happens when the rain starts on the road in New Zealand. This is what happens if you don't drive according to the conditions. And this is the last movie that I want to show from my friends from Germany, from Mark Hasselsaal and his colleagues, where they also resolved in particular the key moment. Do I take the bike or do I take the car? Cheat the system, but you can never cheat yourself. So, what all these examples show, and all these strategies show, is how you can reason all the way from what kind of society and what kind of quality of life do we aim for as designers, from particular long-term effect that you aim for in terms of behavior, experience, and attitudes, via the user experience, the product experience, all the way down to the product and its properties. And ultimately, that's what design, I think, is about. And with that, and some chocolates, but I'm not going to explain. I want to thank you for your attention. And apologies again for the technical. Do we have time for break? Questions over the break?
Yes, or
During the break. Yeah, I'm available for questions.
Dado a questão do tempo, a gente vai dar um intervalo breve e aí ele fica disponível aqui. Quem tiver alguma pergunta mais direcionada pode fazer. Obrigado. Aí, quanto tempo de intervalo? 5 minutos. Só para fazer um xixizinho, a gente volta.
Ah, tem um lanche, mas o lanche é bem rapidinho. Ou o lanche é rapidinho.
Deu certo o stream?
O teto é igual, mas é tudo que tenho, tudo mais é sobra lixo. Lá pra barato que vem, assim o tempo passa, a vida segue, não me estanca o corte, hoje eu tenho amor, azar ou sorte. Não há luz que me segue, nem a luz que eu sigo. Estou só a vida do caminho, sou eu na minha briga. Lá fora é onde eu não da cidade. Lá fora é onde a vida cruza, e tudo é dela, comédia grega, tragédia russa. Eu estou lá, eu sou lá, eu dos índios, mas não tenho seres das coisas que eu vi, mas em que você guarda, você vê, escuta, se acertar, se escutar, você faz
Senhoras e senhores, podemos retomar? Monitores, por favor, peça às pessoas que já retornem ao auditório para que a gente retome as nossas atividades. Tira o lanchinho, suspenda o lanchinho. Esconda-me ele. Para nos apresentar a próxima conferência, eu gostaria de convidar o professor Hugo Nascimento para nos apresentar o próximo conferencista.
Bom dia. Vamos dar prosseguimento então com o professor Aaron Friedman. O professor Aaron Friedman é professor titular e professor na Universidade de SIIMI. Fez o seu doutorado há vários anos, acho que por volta de 2012, se não me engano, em ciência da computação, com ênfase em visualização de informações, em particular na linha de desenho de dados. O professor Ridley é atualmente o chefe da área de IHC, Educação Humana e Computador, da Universidade de St. Andrews, Escócia, e ele é também o diretor do SAC, que é o grupo de pesquisa em IHC da Universidade. Então, ele vai nos presentear aqui com uma apresentação dos seus projetos de pesquisa realizados nos últimos anos. Ele está conosco aqui na universidade, também em leve por um mês, como visiting professor, né, e ele fazendo trabalho com financiamento aí do Fund, do grupo Green Youth Fund e o que Academics, um recurso Inglaterra, Brasil. Então, thank you very much for being here. We expect to have a good stay and a nice talk for everyone.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for the introduction. Again, bon dia. Also, thank you to the Newton Fund for bringing me here to Guyana for this 4-week period. What I'll talk today is about this challenge I see in applications and interaction across devices. And I call this talk being trapped in Appland. And that's how I feel in many cases we are right now, in the design of mobile devices, in the design of technologies that are going to fit into televisions, into medical devices, into wearable computers. Everything is getting trapped inside of these individual applications and these little islands of interaction. And so, as Ugo said, I come from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. It's 600 years old as a university, so it goes back quite a long way. One of our more famous recent graduates is the Prince of Wales. He met his wife in St. Andrews, the future Queen of England, one day. So there's a lot of students come to St. Andrews in the hope of meeting their future king or queen. So I recommend you come and study there. We have a group in St. Andrews that do HCI research, a very broad group: natural language processing, security, usable security, human data interaction, tabletop computing, mobile computing, and we do lots of fun activities together as a group. Within this, my own research is focused on the combination of ubiquitous computing, novel interfaces, and also information visualization. So this picture here shows you sort of an overview of the things that I have done and continue to do. These sort of three areas. Now, some projects just live in one area, totally just ubiquitous computing. Some projects, of course, cross multiple areas. So I have some projects that combine ubiquitous computing, novel interfaces, and information visualization. This project, this strand of research at the bottom here, not really going to talk about today, unless it touches on novel interfaces or it touches on ubiquitous computing. I'll talk about it. But this is the main project area that brings me to Brazil for the work that I'm doing with Hugo on the visualization of large graphs and how we evaluate those. How do we actually know that one drawing is more effective than another drawing? It depends on the person, it depends on the context, it depends on the task, it depends on the data, it depends on lots of different things. I'm not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the top one. Because our first speaker mentioned this word aesthetics in his talk, I decided I'd create a link, mostly just to show you what people in information visualization or graph drawing think aesthetics means. Okay? So here's a picture. Now, is that aesthetic? Well, we have a measure. We can count up the number of crossings, how many times those lines cross each other. That's an aesthetic. We can average out the edge length. That's another aesthetic. We can figure out the aspect ratio of that drawing. That's another aesthetic. Or we have the maximum edge length. That's another aesthetic. Now, this is literally what graph drawing aesthetics are. So, of course, this is a very contentious use of the word aesthetics because it's something that you don't need a human for. You just count up those numbers, you count the crossings, you count the aspect ratio, you count the maximum edge length, and that gives you an aesthetic measure. You don't need a human. You just can come up with a diagram, come up with a picture, and say, this is more aesthetic than that. Of course, when you step out of graph drawing and you step out of computer science and you start looking into design and visual science and psychology and people who actually understand the domain, the aesthetic, the meaning of aesthetics changes quite considerably. So we can have a discussion about, is this aesthetic or not aesthetic? And this actually is also a diagram from one of our academic brothers, Tim Dwyer. So hopefully he never sees this video. But HCI itself is a very broad field. So the bit I do is only a very small subsection of it. There's lots of other stuff that's actually out there. So much so that we actually have this whole set of conferences, this whole family of conferences. I'm the chair of the Mobile HCI Steering Committee, so we do a lot of mobile interaction, but this conference spans all the way through to CHI, and that's a conference that I'm traveling to tomorrow. So I'll leave this conference and I'll go to CHI, which begins on Saturday in San Jose, California. All the way through to user modeling, creativity and cognition, tabletop surfaces, tangible and embedded interaction, user modeling, virtual reality, computer-supported cooperative work. So this area of HCI is very, very big, and my bit of it is only quite small. So I only touch on 9 of these conferences. We have 23 of them in total. So if you're interested in the things I talk about, I'd encourage you to go to the ACM Digital Library, but more importantly, I'd actually encourage you to kind of dig into any one of those individual conferences. So if I talk about something in collaboration, well, there's a whole long series on computer-supported cooperative work. If I talk on something to do with children, which is a paper we have next week at CHI on studying iPad use, we have the International Interactive Design with Children conference. Mobile HCI, surface computers, ubiquitous computing, user interface software technology. So each year across these conferences, plus CHI, we have about 10,000 people attend all of these conferences all around the world. Unfortunately, until the Zika virus came along, well, next year we were going to have CSCW in Brazil, but unfortunately that conference has actually had to move up to North America because there's some people who are worried about traveling because of that. So it's an international group, and I'd encourage you to have a look at the type of research that's out there. But for me, it's just these areas. These are the things I'm going to be talking about. So the question I've begun my research with for a long time is, what is the computer that you see today? And is it just the sort of typical desktop computers that we're kind of used to? Or should we actually be thinking about designing for all of the mobile devices? Or should we actually be thinking about like embedded computers or gaming devices? or smaller devices, wearable devices, maybe things that are physically in the environment. All of these things are mediated between the human, all of these computers, and this huge amount of potential for interaction. Now, right now, we're the ones dealing with that, okay? This is our problem. The computer does very little to help us with this, okay? The systems, the architecture, the design, the thinking about how the applications of the system should work together, very little thought goes into making all of this work together. Now, of course, if you're sitting there thinking, well, if you own 42 devices, that's your fault. Well, that's not acceptable in the future, okay? Because this is going to happen. Like, every device is basically going to start having a computer built into it. And HCI, how we interact with that, is going to be a problem. Because we're going to have more and more points of interaction, more and more applications, more and more data, more and more expectations, and each one of these little things lives separately. So the way I see this right now is this is what we look like, okay? We live on these little islands of interaction, and they're all separated from each other. And as long as you're staying on one of the sets of islands, you're fine. If you try and move between the islands, that's where problems start to come in. So I was motivated to think about this on a trip to Mauritius, which has this large set of islands, and these are great. Some of these are, very beautiful, very tranquil, very calm. So when we actually go and look at the original vision of ubiquitous computing, this is what it was talking about. Like gorgeous, like a walk in the woods, very peaceful, very calm, just really quite beautiful. But actually, when you get down to it and you actually zoom in on some of the islands, well, some of them actually aren't so aesthetic. Some of them are actually really, really built up, really crowded, jammed together. And literally, one of those islands, I think it's called Fushui, is this island. It's the rubbish island, okay? It's filled with garbage, and it's burning all day long, okay? Now, some of the islands of interaction that we have look like this. Some of the islands look like this, very functional, put together, but not very aesthetic. And some of the islands look beautiful. So when I go back and I look at my islands, this is actually what I see. I see the Windows island, I see the Sony island, I see the Android Isles, I see Apple Land, I see the Amazon Island, I see the Samsung Island, and I see the LG Island. It's a little down the corner, this tiny little Linux island. Okay? And they're all sorry. Actually, in Brazil, there's a lot more Linux installations I've noticed here than other countries. Anyway, but they're all separated from each other. Okay, so I spend I come here and then I try to get things. I live on Apple Island primarily. My products, my watches, my smart TV, everything is in the Apple Island. But I have to own some Sony products, so moving between those islands is a little bit complicated. Everything that I learned how to do in that island, I forget. It's like coming here. I speak no Portuguese. Okay, basically no Portuguese. I know how to order coffee, I know how to say excuse me, I know how to say good morning and hello, but that's it. I know very little about how to interact in this land. Okay? And this is what it's like. When you leave this island of interaction to move to this island, it gets a little difficult. For me, when I try to leave this island and go to this island, it becomes incredibly difficult. Okay? Some of the basic principles are the same. Breathing, walking, eating, yeah, that's all the same. But it's the subtle differences that makes it very hard to move between these islands, let alone moving between applications even within one of those islands. So we have this vision of ubiquitous computing that goes back a long way to Mark Weiser. It's going to be this distributed computing spread out in space so that eventually the computer will disappear. Now the resulting effect of this is we're going to have computing in everyday objects, not just in special purpose devices, not just in these little windows of interaction, okay? It's going to be embedded, it's going to be ingrained in all of the activities, all of the things that we do. And so the question to me right now is this as good as we can do? Like, is this the high point for human-computer interaction? Are these things the high point for human-computer interaction? Or are we actually limiting ourselves by thinking about those little windows, those little boxes, those little devices as being the best we can do? And I really think we are. I think we are honestly limiting ourselves in terms of that points of interaction. Because what we can look at is this graphical user interface is going to extend. We're going to have a lot more inputs that we can actually consider when we're looking at this ubiquitous computer or this ubiquitous user interface. The keyboard, the mouse, lots of buttons, joysticks, controllers, speech, touch, pressure, gesture, location, all kinds of physiological inputs We can take identity, we can take embedded sensing, we can take data mining, we can take inference. All of these can become the inputs to the computer. And at the same time as all of these becoming inputs to the computer, we can start thinking about lots more outputs from the computer coming to the environment around us. Lots of research in haptic output, thermal output, things actually having a temperature and that meaning something to you. And environmental updates, controlling the environment, controlling, actuating things so that the environment feels different. Multiple audio-video channels, multiple uses of our sense. So trying to rely on not just our sense of sight, but actually looking at our sense of taste, smell, touch, hearing, looking at all of those senses and thinking, what would that actually look like? To me, the area that I'm kind of heavily looking at is this sort of displays everywhere. So when we have this environment where displays are ubiquitous, where we have shared environments with lots of displays, or people on the go, or people using multiple displays, or people using large displays, or even when you're looking at it at sort of a grand scale, where you're, let's say, looking at multiple people, looking at multiple small devices, or individuals looking at large distributed devices, or looking at people in room scale displays, where there's lots of devices, lots of displays all around, pixels around them, or getting all the way up to building scale displays. So when you're actually looking at entire buildings, media facades, actually being part of the interaction space, that's the kind of work I'm interested in. I just wanted to add in a couple of quick videos before I get into the sort of the focus on the eye and the focus on the sort of human vision. I want to have a look at some places that we might interact with digital technologies in the future, like on tables, that seems easy enough. On walls, that's quite common. Well, wrists, that becomes common. What about legs? Maybe we should interact with our legs. So this is a project I did nearly 14 years ago now. This is one of the first applications designed for older people doing photo sharing on large interactive tabletops. This was published in Kai about 10 years ago. We started the project about 14 years ago. And within this, it actually allows people to come with their digital content, which was actually on something like an iPhone, but this device had no screen. Okay? And what you could do with this device is you could pour the content onto the display. Once you had the content on this display, you could flick the content to another display. You could bunch it, you could bounce it, you could bump it, you could twist it, you could turn it, you could flip it. There's actually a gesture in here which to this day these systems just don't tend to have. It's called a resize. It's a rotation resize gesture. Because when you're actually sitting with somebody opposite you, the big problem becomes orienting their content. This was long before the International Tabletop Conference, long before the ISS conference. So people have started looking at these sort of tabletop environments from a long time ago. We've also done work on gestural interaction in the environment and actually using it as a mechanism to input to devices. So here this is an older project using the original Kinect. And here we're using lots of machine learning, lots of priors, lots of ability to sort of figure out which words are you actually inputting to a system. Here's a more recent system where we're actually looking at, let's say, a wrist-worn device. So these are the sort of simple gestures that we have with these devices right now. Flicking, tapping, pinching, but could we extend that? Could we extend it to pressure, twist, panning? Could we actually take, rather than taking these kind of bespoke hardware solutions where you actually add it, we just embed the sensing into the device itself using a sensor that's already in there, in this case the IMU. And in this case with the IMU, we can detect pressure touch, orientation, angle, how much, in which particular direction it is. We can also recognize twisting, whether or not, how much you're actually twisting this device. No extra hardware been added in here, just processing, just algorithms, just the design of new interaction with the existing systems. Can we actually have twisting? Can we have tapping? Can we have all kinds of like panning gestures on these same sort of devices? And finally, can we actually start looking at the body itself? So here we actually have a Project Solly from Google embedded on the back of a phone, which this now knows what it's touching. So the interface changes. So when the interface is touching the lower arm versus a finger versus a glove versus the back of the hand versus the front of the hand versus the calf versus the upper arm versus the lower arm versus the stomach. So this loads up a food application, which of course is on. And finally, the shirt, maybe on your pants, will load up Google Maps. And finally, maybe you want to load up your jogging application, so you touch it on the calf of your leg. This is sensing the body parts. So this now knows the device isn't just like GPS location. It knows where on the body it's being placed, which means suddenly if it's placed on your shoulder, on your wrist, in your pocket, if you're holding it in a hand, if you're holding it in a different hand, if you're holding it just with a single finger, all of these can trigger off different types of interactions. Okay? Our video is actually going to be incorporated into the Google I/O that you'll be seeing next month. So if you watch the Google I/O, I hope, we're told it might not be there. So if this video ever goes online, hopefully it'll be on the Google I/O. Anyway, and in terms of displays, these are the kind of things that I'm interested in doing, but kind of the whole end-to-end. So if we're looking across multiple displays, well, knowing something about human vision, knowing about the eye and taking that into account will be useful. So we model the eye. We also have to come up with techniques to measure the difference between what the eye is seeing and what the display is producing. So this might be using eye tracking, it might be using gaze tracking, it might be using research from vision science. We also want to be able to take into account when we're switching between these displays, when suddenly we're looking at a smartwatch and then we go to a head-mounted display, or we go from one display to a second display, or we go from a public display to a private display. There's a cost associated with that switching. If we know which device you're looking at, and we know the distance that you're from the device, we can adapt what you're seeing on the display. We can take into account the fact that we know how far you are, we know something about your vision, and we know something about what you're doing. So one of the early projects we did was this switch factors. So we tried to come up with a taxonomy for understanding what do these type of switches look like. So what we came up with is this very simple set. The display contiguity, the angular coverage, the content coordination, the input directedness, and finally the input display correspondence. So I'll show you some examples of what these look like. The first one is, how do the displays align around you? Now this is an egocentric measure. This is measured from an individual's point of view. Do the displays actually line up? Are they visually field and depth contiguous? So do they actually line up? Or are they actually split up? You know? So right now there's 3 monitors sitting right here, and these 2 here are actually visually field contiguous because they're almost at the same depth, but they're discontiguous because there's a gap between them. What about this? What about things that actually appear to be contiguous? So I look at these 2 displays from this angle, they're overlapping, but they're discontiguous, so there's actually a physical gap between them in terms of the space. You can then start to look at things like the field of view, like how far around the field of view are these devices. So if you're looking at a triple head monitor display, you're getting something like 200 degrees. It is an entirely wraparound display, and does it go up and above and around your head? Or do you get things like panoramas? Are you talking about full 360 environments? One of the PhD students in St. Andrews is looking at exactly this. He's using a single spherical display, a single spherical projector, to project out an entire room display on every wall and the floor. So the entire room becomes the display. But of course means things are possibly happening behind your head and you can't even see them. Then the question, of course, becomes how do we handle input in this type of space? So right now, it's easy because, you know, the input and the screen, everything is connected into one device. But if suddenly I don't care about just that set of pixels, I want to deal with all the pixels, is it indirect input? Is it some sort of hybrid? I do something on one device and I see the output on the other? Or is it direct? Do I actually have to walk up to the walls and touch them? Do I have to walk up to the devices and touch them? Do I have to walk up to the head-mounted display and touch it? Is there also this correspondence? You know, is there some sort of global control? Is it just me moving one sort of virtual mouse pointer across 20 different devices? Okay, well, there's multiple people. Or is it redirected? Is it at any given moment I'm using one device and I'm sort of sending out control items? Or is it local? Do I have to walk up and touch things? And there's different metaphors and there's different ways of doing this. The other thing we've studied is the cost of this. Okay, and this is certainly something that is not well studied and not well considered. It's becoming more well considered now that these sort of multi-display environments are becoming common. Okay, so we understand the limitations of these devices. Okay, they're mobile, great. They're personal, great. You can use these devices in all kinds of places that you probably shouldn't, like driving. Very common, but they have limitations. This has more screen real estate. This is good. Okay, this is smaller. There's a cost there, okay? But can we use both, okay? Can we actually use both? So our motivating scenario looks like this. I'm looking at a map, it's quite small, and then in the environment, there's a large public display. And I'd like to just use those pixels. I'd just like to borrow those pixels for a short period of time to help me with my navigation. But then, As I'm borrowing these pixels, I have to look at the public display, and then I have to look back at my personal display. I have to jump between the two. Okay? So the research questions here are the large displays which are being used, appropriated for supporting mobile tasks. Maybe there's some question around the task versus the user interface configuration, and then is there a cost of attention switching? So we set up an experiment where we have people holding a mobile device. We record the data, we have tracking devices, and we have a large display. And then we have different configurations where it's purely mobile, or there's a hybrid, it's on both displays, or it's just on the large display. And when it's just on the large display, the small display that you're using in front of you just becomes like a trackpad, effectively. Took a set of participants, we did a study with them for an hour, we gave them different tasks, things like map navigation, text navigation, image navigation. We gave them different data sizes, small sets of data, large sets of data. And then we gave them tasks. And our first task was map navigation. So we asked them to locate a place within a specific criteria, like basically find the cheapest hotel, where some of it's on the mobile device and some of it's on the public display. What we found, these little stars represent statistically significant differences between the means of each of these groups, is that when you actually look at the completion times for small and you look at the completion times for large, there is a difference. So there's a difference between the large display and the hybrid configuration, or between the large display and the mobile configuration. So there are differences, and the difference is due to the condition which we put people under. More importantly here is our determination of this cost, okay? So because we actually kept track of the time, and we kept track of the number of gaze shifts, so that means I'm looking at this device, I'm looking at that device, I'm looking at this device, I'm looking at that device. That's a gaze shift, okay? We count those up. We count up the time, we have all of our participants, and then the question is, can we fit a linear regression to that? Yes, we can. What does that, how much of that linear regression explains the data? This much. What is the important point in here? This factor in here, which is if you know the number of gaze shifts, you can multiply that by 1.8 seconds, and that's the additional cost. So in this type of configuration with these type of subjects, etc., shifting the gaze between the two different displays takes about 1.8 seconds. And you think, that doesn't really matter. 1.8 seconds, that's nothing. That's really quick. In human-computer interaction, we're worried about 100 milliseconds. We're worried about 50 milliseconds. We're worried about, really small amounts of time make a huge difference. If you're talking about an interaction which you expect to last 5 seconds, and you add in 1.8 seconds, you've just blown up the time massively. If you're thinking about 30 seconds of interaction, and you add in 2 seconds, it's a huge additional cost. So switching gaze is a big, big cost. So the conclusions in that study were that the large display can improve the task performance, but that distributing the content across these displays adds in an overhead, especially in things like visual search. But that tasks that require a continuous space, for example map search, benefit most from the large display. Okay? So the idea here is that this idea of I roll out a map and it only fits onto the small display, but then I roll it out onto more pixels, that works well. Okay? Because it's sort of a continuation, it's just extending the boundaries of the device onto other things. As I said, we're also interested in looking at sort of the distance between the eyes and the display. When we can do that, we're interested in doing a series of different things. Okay? And we look at this in terms of 2 dimensions. Okay? How aware is the user of what we're doing? Does the user know that we're adapting the display? And the second thing is, what is the perceived resolution of the display that they actually see? These are 3 existing systems, cam, shift, gaze, X, and lean and zoom. I'll explain lean and zoom because it's the easiest one. I'm looking at a web browser, the standard font size is 20. I can't really see it. I lean in, it becomes 22. Suddenly, I can read it. It's okay, I lean back, and it zooms out. So I lean in, it zooms. I lean back, it zooms out. So I lean, and the interface zooms. And this is very intrusive, and it's pretty disruptive. You know it's happening. You can see it's happening. Okay? You're not going to miss it. The question for us is, can we do things that are pretty subtle? And actually, can we do things that are even undetectable? Okay? You don't even see it that we're doing it. Okay? For example, If I wanted to show a movie in this room and I knew everybody was watching it from the very back of the room, maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't download a 4K movie. I'd download the 1080p and tell you it's a 4K movie. You're all sitting at the back going, oh, I know the difference. You know what? You can't know the difference because your eyes can't see it. Okay? You're too far away. If we know how far away you are, we can take that into account. We know it's a lower resolution. We know your eyes can't resolve that amount of information from that distance. Therefore, we don't have to show a high resolution image. Same thing on a mobile device that's like from your face. Okay? So we can do it so that it's totally undetectable. And we can do this, let's say, adaptive images. Or we can do it so that it's actually quite subtle. So it's something that changes but isn't actually, in your face. So we developed a distance tracking algorithm where we're basically picking out using computer vision the eye pair, then we're matching the distance, we're measuring it. Once we have that, we then did an experiment where we took commodity cameras, we put people in various rooms, various distances, a combination of females and males, consumer grade cameras, and we tested it up to a sort of a standard range. And we had a set of images that we were analysing. One of the things we could then do with this is develop systems like this. So this is a system called spider eyes. So each person is moving independently, and unfortunately you can't see the visualization there. But the second where they both come into alignment, and then they actually move as a group, so if they come close together, and they move then as a group, this interface changes just to show one visualization. When they split apart, because they're actually at different distances, they get two different visualizations. Okay? So when they're working together, they see a single visualization. When they're working apart, they don't. Also, because we know people aren't looking at the display, we don't show any of the content. But suddenly when they turn their attention to it, we actually start to show the visualization. And as they move back and forth, we change the visualization. They get closer, more detail. They move further away, less detail, more abstract visualization. One of the problems that we face in all of this is that we have lots of pixels around us, but we only have two eyes, each of us. Okay? And even has three eyes, please come and talk to me. Generally, we have two eyes. Some of us only have one, and some of us have no sight at all. Okay? We're attending to one particular part of the display. So there's a central foveal vision region that you have, and around it you have this paracentral area, and then you've got this peripheral vision. But you're looking at something, and the other things aren't the focus. I'm looking at the mobile device, I'm not really looking at this at the same time. Peripherally I can see it, but it's not my focus. And it's the same thing with lots of different systems. Here's a Bloomberg terminal with lots of different displays. Here's a command and control center that they use for drones in the US military. 16 different displays. Okay? Every time they get a new sensor, ooh, we can add this new sensor to the drone. Oh, I know what we can do, we can monitor the new sensor. Oh, how will we monitor it? Let's add in another display, and just keep on growing the number of displays. Very easy solution. Not such a great HCI design. And big command and control centers, okay? So we have lots and lots of pixels around us, but we've only got a pair of eyes. So we did a study, and we developed a system which we patented called diff displays. Now what diff displays does, it takes your gaze and visually diffs what you actually see. So if I'm looking at this display, and I can measure that, I'm focusing on one display. If there's a change here and a change here, we don't show those changes. We bundle up all those changes. And when you look back at the display, we show you a visualization which summarizes all the changes that occurred while you weren't looking. Okay? So one of the techniques was called freeze frame. So here I'm looking at the display. Now I look away. Okay? I look away. Now it freezes. Nothing changes. Now I'm going to look back. And in that small moment, when I look back, I saw a visual diff. Okay? I saw a very short, very subtle visual diff that just showed me everything that had changed on that screen in that short period of time while I wasn't paying attention to it. So we can do this. We can have very subtle techniques, we can have very intrusive techniques, we can spread out the amount of time that we actually use to show you the changes. But of course we can go beyond just this screen or window awareness, because that diff display paper that I showed you, which was published at IUI, that was only pixel-based. It knew nothing about the content. Okay? It was just looking at every single pixel and saying, have you changed? No. Have you changed? Yes, you have. How much have you changed? And then apply a visual function to it. We can do exactly the same thing with all of these widgets. Okay? So we can build the gaze awareness into the user interface components that we actually provide to people. So when you build an interface, we know if you've actually looked at this widget. Okay? So if there's a widget which is showing, let's say, a status, or there's something that's changed, or there's a new item, or the percentage has changed, or the interaction paradigm has changed, if something has changed, we can know it, and then we can know whether or not you've seen it, and whether you've looked at it, and if you have or haven't, we can then update accordingly. So we built this system called the Attention Aware Toolkit. Okay? Very simple. You take the standard control interface elements and you use the boundary around them as a place to do these visual notifications, to do these visual changes. So it's gaze-aware user interface components, these widgets. Very subtle changes within the widgets. There's 3 categories. There might be the entire screen, part of the screen, or the mirroring techniques. We built a C# toolkit, and we built a series of these interface widgets. There's a paper on this at the Advanced Visual Interface Conference a couple of years ago, AVR, that you can read about. We then used it to build a health application, which was spread across 3 screens. So this is the interface. This is the existing application. So all we did was we recompiled it with our attention-aware widgets built into it. So this thing's changing. There's extra columns getting added in. There's alerts coming up. There's flags getting set. And all of this is happening dynamically on each of the screens at any given moment. So this is actually what it looks like. So this person attending to a task on this screen, but there's changes on the other 2 screens at any given moment. So we did an evaluation of 12 participants. We did this healthcare application. We gave them a typical use case. So for example, the left screen was showing tasks. The center screen was showing the alerts. And the right screen was showing where all the staff were in the hospital. And then we did 2 different versions of it, one with our techniques, one without our techniques. The results of this evaluation, we did it within subject design, we took the toolkit as our independent variable, and we took accuracy as a dependent variable. We showed an improvement, and because of the current state changes, we had to apply a Bonferroni correction to our statistical measures, but you can read about that in the paper. The important thing here is that you can see the error rates, you can see the accuracy goes up once people actually start using these attention-aware widgets. So I know you didn't see an update because you weren't looking at the screens. When you look back, I show you the visual change. I indicate that there's actually been something that's actually changed there. Okay? The other thing we could try to do is looking at these displays which actually show you different content from different angles. So here you can see from the right, you see subtitles, and from the left, the subtitles now disappear. Okay? We're not changing the display. We're just taking advantage of a particular visual property in the display technology, the twisted pneumatic displays, to actually give you from one angle subtitles and from the other angle no subtitles. So in this case, you could imagine, and it's also distance aware. So as you go further back, the font size gets bigger. As you get closer, the font size gets smaller. So to you, the font size always appears the same. So as you get closer, it appears the font is just continually the same size. So you can go really far back and the font will just get big or get close. And also on one side, you see nothing. So you imagine here in Brazil, one side of the room, people would be seeing a movie in Brazil in Portuguese with English subtitles, and then people who speak Portuguese just sit on the other side of the room and they'll see no subtitles. And it's on the same screen. No head glasses, no nothing like that. We also try to do this where we actually know where there's sensors in these devices. So these devices here have cameras in them. So can we use those cameras to measure the distance to your eyes? We can. So at an arm's distance, if I was using a mapping application, all I might see is an arrow which says go that way. And if I twist it, it shows the arrow going in a different direction. Very simple, very abstract. What we don't show at this level is the name of the streets. Why? At that distance, given the resolution of the display, given your eyes, we know you actually can't really read it. Okay? We might be able to see roughly the shape of it, but actually reading it, legibly reading it at an arm's distance, can be difficult at some of the resolutions on these maps. You bring it closer, you can see it no problem. And that's what happens here. So you bring the map close to your face, you read all the details you want. And you bring the map halfway to your face, we actually take away some details, we simplify it. So depending on the distance that the display is from your face, we change the interface. Okay. And as with all of these things, we do a study. I know it's really sad, but this is what we do. Design something, test it, evaluate it, publish. Oh, sorry, let me show you this one. Okay. So one of the interesting things here, and you run into a problem. So when you start going from this type of display to this type of display, as you start changing things, as you start changing color, as you start changing shape, will people see it? Okay. So have a look at this visualization and look at the left or look at the right and something is changing. Okay? Now, just watch it. Don't share it with anybody else. Just watch it and ask yourself, did you see a change? So the person is moving the iPad away from their face and then bringing it back. And the question is, did you see anything? Okay, let's go. Do you see a change? Okay, she's bringing it back now. It's changing again. Changing again, changing again, changing again. Okay, and then quickly, hands up, how many people saw change? Wow, okay. Fade, 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 fade. Totally gone. Fade, 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 fade. Coming back, slowly, slowly, returning. Oh, you tricked me. Why didn't trick you? Your brain, your eyes tricked you. Okay? This is called change blindness. Okay? Well-known phenomenon in psychology. Okay? Which is bad. Like, oh no, that's terrible, I don't want to do that. Except, maybe it could be good. Maybe I could actually change the interface and not burden you. Make it undetectable. Get rid of things that I know you don't need to see, and then put them back when I think you do need to see them. Without burdening you, not popping up a dialogue and saying, hello, I'm Clippy, would you mind if I removed an icon? Like, oh dear God, no. Okay? So doing things on your benefit, but without changing things. Again, we did a user study. We showed that with gradual change, instant change, lots of errors, but with no change, people actually were able to determine that. And we tried it with different types of granularity. So we tried it with really tiny things, medium-sized things, and really big things. Like lots of lines, lots of things, same thing, lots of things that we're changing. Again, we're looking at these types of displays. I'm sure I've got enough time. Oh, sorry, yeah, I do. We're also interested, so this question of the displays. So right now, I'm looking at these three displays. That one on the right is separate, but these two sort of overlap. Like, okay, how would I accommodate that? How could I stitch those two displays together? Then what happens when actually I start wearing head-mounted displays? Well, suddenly I'm going to have a head-mounted display which is going to show me, it's going to be showing me visual content in front of me. And it doesn't care right now. It doesn't care that I'm looking at a tablet or I'm looking at a mobile device. It doesn't care that I'm looking at my smartwatch. It doesn't care that I'm looking at a tablet computer. It doesn't care that I'm looking at a public display. These are just two visual signals that are overlapping. They don't care about each other. But what happens if they could care about each other? Okay? What happens if we could actually coordinate them? So in this case, what you're actually seeing is a coordinated interface that's partly on your head-mounted display and partly on your smartwatch. It's a low-fidelity, high-fidelity display. The center flag, that's in high fidelity. That's on the smartwatch. These other icons around you, they're floating in your head-mounted display vision. Here, you're looking at an icon that's on the smartwatch. The extended set of icons are in the head-mounted display. Here you're looking at a map, and here the two are snapped together. So the actual head-mounted display opens up a hole where it knows your smartwatch is. So if you bring the smartwatch into the same region as the head-mounted display, it opens a hole and projects no information there, but allows the watch to fill it in. So this piece here is on the watch. This piece here is in the head-mounted display. And what you're doing is you're combining the two together. So why do you do this? Well, this is my colleague. Smartphones are great. You know, it takes about 7 seconds to get it out. That's pretty fun. Okay? But it takes time to access them. And then you want to deal with your wearables. They're really small. You know, they're hard to see, hard to interact with, you know, and you want to go between the two. So here we were thinking about the seams, okay? So when you're moving between one and the other, okay, there's seams that open up. So this is the scenario. You have a head-mounted display, you're looking at a smartwatch, you're looking at a tablet, you're looking at a mobile device, you're looking at a laptop. Can this region and this region be merged together? Okay? Can they be actually seen as one display? Okay? So let me just quickly show you some examples. So there's a device-aligned interaction. Let me just show you it running. Okay? So here what you see is a keyboard on the phone. So I'm typing on the keyboard, hello world. Okay? At the same time, this display I'm seeing in the head-mounted display. And of course you can see it's not perfect, it's not a commercial product, it's just a piece of research. Okay? And the two stay aligned. Okay? So when you're thinking about it, you see this as one big visual display. But of course they're two separate displays. But you hopefully try and experience it as one combined display. Okay? And We then try different locator tasks. Of course, in this case, we have to have a kind of a really good tracking system, so we're using a Vicon for this. And then we're looking at other types of interaction, where maybe you're splitting the interaction, where you're interacting with one device, but you're seeing the output on the other. Okay? And we're also quite interested in the visual fidelities of these displays, because these small displays that you're using are quite high fidelity. You know, you can look at them, and they're quite sharp. These other devices, be it a HoloLens, be it the new Magic Leap, even be it like sort of a window that you might see through from, let's say, a VR goggle like the Vine or the Rift, they're lower resolution. Okay, they are absolutely, unquestionably lower resolution than what you're getting with your smart devices right now. So there's a mismatch between the two. Okay. So then the question is, what do you show on the high fidelity display? What do you show on the low fidelity display? Can you use 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different devices simultaneously? Very interesting part of this question, this is one of the really fun parts of this question, is when you're doing this, when you're doing these types of interactions, is it body aligned or is it device aligned? Let me explain these two concepts. Okay. Body aligned is this purely egocentric view. I am the world. It's all about me. Okay? And you're sitting there thinking, oh, I bet he thinks that's true. Okay, is that true? Okay, it's not true, not true. Okay, but it's me. Okay? So here's the device, and I move around. So I'm looking at my head-mounted display, and I move around. And everything is drawn with respect to my body. So this is the front, and that's the back. And whatever happens, that's what I see. So if I have a head-mounted display with content, maybe I have a virtual map that's drawn around my head in 360, and I can move around and I can look at it. There we go, body aligned, okay? But maybe, just maybe, what you actually want to do is you want to pick one of the devices and say, you know what, that's the world, okay? This is the difference between Galileo and Copernicus. Okay, is it the sun is the center of the universe, or the earth is the center of the universe? Okay, so let's say the earth is the center of the universe. This device then becomes the world. So if there's a map displayed here, and I lay it flat, in my head-mounted display, the map goes flat as well. Okay, and I twist this device, and as I twist it, the map moves accordingly. So everything that I see in my head-mounted display is drawn flat around this. So I move it back, it looks all flat. I look at this angle, 45 degrees. This is 45 degrees. And then what I see in the head-mounted display is also 45 degrees. Okay? But when I maybe do a body image, the map is in front of me, and it's floating, and I'm looking at a map of Guyana, and I can't really read the name of that restaurant. That's okay. I bring my phone up, and I move the phone to the place in the image where I can't read it, and then suddenly on the display I can see it. Okay? This becomes a window into my other window, and the two work together. Okay? So I move this around, and this big image stays static. Okay? That's body-centric. I move this around, and everything moves, then it's device-centric. When you do this, lots and lots of challenges. Okay? You have to think about all the visual attention. You have to think about the cost of switching. I'm looking at my smartwatch, I'm looking at a head-mounted display, I'm looking at a mobile device. There's a cost. Focus. Big problems in human vision. Okay, there's a cost associated with just moving the eyes. This ocular motion that actually takes time. There's also your field of view that you have to take into account. Big issue around privacy. You know, I'm interacting with this data. It becomes this very isolating thing. Social acceptability. Is it okay to be standing in the middle of Guyana looking for navigation and moving your phone around? Okay? Okay, that's a different reason. That's not social acceptability. That's maybe getting it stolen. Okay? And then social participation. Am I creating a bubble? Okay? Am I creating this bubble around me and I'm pushing all of you out because that's totally disconnected? Do I exclude you or do I want to engage with people? Okay? So for us and for me, and for the kind of research that I do, I'm interested in all the new sorts of techniques to measure this. So be it computer vision, be it tracking, be it Wi-Fi signal sensing, be it Bluetooth sensing. We want to do more on this modeling of the eye, and this is actually one bit of the talk that I had to sacrifice. But one thing we did previously is we generated synthetic eyes, digital eyes, and with those eyes we could measure what the display was telling us. Okay? Those eyes allowed us to score different types of interfaces, okay, using a very low-level vision of a model of vision. We are also interested in moving across multiple displays and actually had to minimize the cost of that. And of course, we're also looking at wearable devices or on-body devices, this whole sort of space. And the reason I want to do this, the reason I want to think about all of these individual devices is to get us off these islands, okay? Is because if we have to think about moving and coordinating between Android and Windows and iOS devices, we're going to have to get off the island. We're going to have to move between the islands. We're going to have to allow people to just move their tasks, move their data, move their interaction between the different devices and not care about who built the island in the first place. I'll end there, and if there's any questions, I'd be very happy to take them. You can go to our website, or you can send me an email. Again, thank you to the Newton Fund for bringing me here to Guyana. I'm around for the next few weeks, so if you have any questions now or later, thank you very much. I should also mention, before I forget, that I was tweeting about the conference, and your can of Red Bull got the most interest. In Denmark last year, they used a Super Cola as their drink, and in Newcastle in England, they used ale, they used alcohol. So maybe later in the day we can have a different can of drink. Okay, sorry, are there any questions on my talk that you have?
Só uma pergunta. Primeiro, vai ter microfone sem cabo. Senão tem que vir aqui para poder mais traduzir para ele lá na sala. Não tem? Então, só o Palito, pode vir?
Eu achei fascinante a sua palestra e eu pensei na minha situação. Eu sou míope, então a minha distância para mim ver alguma coisa é muito diferente das outras pessoas. Haveria uma hipótese da gente poder adaptar-se? Claro que teria que ser cada pessoa fazer. Fiquei pensando numa hipótese assim. É isso.
So people now, confusing during the translation. It's like, I didn't say that, I didn't say that. Maybe he says it better. Okay, so people who are looking at optical displays, where they're placing the display into a contact lens that will go on top of your eye, or looking at placing the display into the glass that's in your glasses, they are taking this into account. So the model that we used for our display was based on data from ophthalmology, from eye measurements of the eye. And we used data from 3,000 people to generate 3,000 pairs of eyes. Some of those eyes were long-sighted, some of those eyes were short-sighted, some had astigmatism, some had defocus. All of those were in our data set that we were using. So the idea would be that when they build the lenses that go into the glass, or when they build the reflective surfaces that are going into holographic displays, or when they're building the micro-lensing that goes into the optical contact lens, if they know you have a certain type of short-sightedness, a certain amount, they can accommodate for that. And then you can see the display, so you can even see content that's far away because it's being refocused. But it's what your glasses are doing right now. I mean, people talk about like, oh, wearable technology is so new. Anyone who's wearing glasses has wearable technology. It's old. Wearable technology is very old. But also very interesting, when the Google Glass came out, people said, oh no, you can't wear that in my bar. People who originally started wearing glasses, I think it was in the 17th century in France, other people would knock them off their face because you were undoing what God had done to you. Okay? So every technology has a challenge associated with it. You know, single glasses, you know, pairs of glasses, everything becomes It's not socially acceptable to use that, and then suddenly maybe we adapt slowly. But certainly, short-sightedness or long-sightedness is definitely being thought of in both in the models and in the technology. Because if you can't see these displays, they're not very much used to people who are sighted.
Eu adorei a tua apresentação. Parece que você está olhando um filme de ficção científica, né? Mas aí eu fico pensando o impacto que essas tecnologias trazem no dia a dia das pessoas, né? Na medida em que essas tecnologias forem se internalizando, né, vai criar uma nova maneira de ver o mundo. E acredito que o acesso à informação e a capacidade que isso nos dá de navegar no mar de informação vai fazer muita diferença no comportamento e na nossa capacidade de tomada de decisão. Aí eu fiquei pensando aqui, qual o preço dessa tecnologia? Minha preocupação, um pouco pensando na palestra anterior, pensando nas questões sociais e quanto elas podem ser transformadoras, e olhando para um mundo em que há uma disparidade muito grande em quem tem acesso e quem não tem acesso, uma tecnologia dessa, se não for pensada dentro dessa situação em que tem que ser acessível em termos de custo, pode provocar uma situação de uma separação ainda maior, elitizar ainda mais quem tem acesso à informação e quem não tem?
Yes, definitely. So I always think back, before I first met Ugo, I was a school teacher in Japan. And this was over 20, maybe 25, maybe 30 years ago now, or 25 years ago. And there were many technologies that I saw in Japan. And I was always so surprised that they would never escape the Japanese market. They would never become commonplace, that they would never become adopted in other countries. And even the work that we did, so this is a technology that was first invented in 1999, and then it was turned into this product in sort of 2001. And then we were able to get access to it in 2002 because I worked in this research lab in Mitsubishi Electric Research Labs in Boston. Even when I show my family this, and people look at it and say, why don't we have that? These type of smart displays that can be sensed, like why is not every restaurant table like this? Why isn't every office table like this? Why isn't every home surface like this? You know, if we can do it, why isn't it? Now, I used to think it was cost. Okay, but actually, all those other factors that I mentioned, you know, social acceptability, is it actually solving a problem? Is it nice but not necessary? Okay, all of those are big mountains to climb. Okay, and I think just like looking at Japan, you know, the cost, they could have got over the cost mountain, but they couldn't get over one of the social acceptability mountains. Or they could have gotten over the cost and the social acceptability mountain, but they could never get over the social exclusion, or the fact that the technology was designed to work in a place that was quite quiet, or quite small, or quite intimate. It wasn't designed to work in noisy, dirty, dusty environments. So a lot of times when technologies are developed in one country, in one location, they're designed in a very kind of small little bubble. And as soon as you start moving out of that bubble, you start running into lots of problems. I used to think it was cost. I used to think that was it. Cost was the thing that would kill it. But actually, recently I went to a conference in Austria on fabrication technologies, and there they were talking about fabrication fab labs in Brazil, fab labs in China, fab labs in India. So the technology cost, I don't think, is the biggest barrier to these things. I think it's the other barriers of acceptability, isolation, exclusion, those little islands of application interaction. And there's a project, if you're interested in having a look at this, called a rephone. Okay? And what the rephone was, is basically they took a phone and they blew it apart. And they blew apart all the different bits and said, okay, maybe when you build your own phone, maybe you don't want GPS, maybe you don't need audio. Maybe you want a bigger battery and a bigger screen, so you can recombine it together. And now you can buy this for about 25 UK pounds, and you can combine and build your own phone. Okay? Even things like the Google Cardboard for VR, like you've got these, you know, the new HTC Vive comes out, and that's nearly $1,000. The Rift needs, you know, a £1,500, you know, $1,500 computer plus $1,000 display. Or you just take a commodity graphical display and then put it in cardboard so you can experiment. So I honestly don't think that the cost is the only barrier, and it's the one that we sort of focus on first. We say, well, we drive that price down and then everyone will use it. I think it's all the other problems, the acceptability, and this is the things I used to see in Japan. Why did they not go global? Was it just the cost? No, some of them were pretty cheap. There was other reasons. Why isn't this everywhere? Why isn't this whole countertop one big display? Okay, it's not just the cost. Okay, certainly not just the cost. Okay, so that has been stuck for a long, long time, and they've tried many versions of it, and it's never broken out. So I don't think. While I think cost is important, I don't think it should be the limiting thought, and I wouldn't think it's always the first thing you think about. I think it's all these other problems get in the way, and then cost, if it's popular enough. And look right now, like you go to China, you go to India, and you look at the penetration of mobile devices, you look at the penetration of mobile phones, like things that, if you buy a high-end device can cost, a percentage of the annual salary of somebody in China. But then you go and you see they have versions of them. They might not be Apple iPhones. There are other devices that are equally, and in many cases, much better. And everyone can afford them. Okay? So the market can drive down the price. But not always. Like VR goggles. You're not going to get them for $10. Okay? They're still going to be at this kind of stratospheric price point. And so I think while I worry about price, I think I would worry about all these other factors as well. Because I would hope that it's not just this. Okay, I hope we don't get stuck on this. Like if this is what I'm carrying around in 30 years' time, I think we've failed. And where the innovation comes from is from students here. Okay, you're the next innovators. You're the next generation to actually make the change. Okay, it's not people like me. My job is to supervise you. You are the people who have to think about. Okay, he said this isn't the high point, but actually I think what we could do is this next thing. It's not Apple. It's not Google. It's you. Okay. Long answer.
Bom, em função do nosso cronograma, procedimento, o professor Coelho estará conosco o dia inteiro, saímos depois no horário do almoço para mais perguntas. Então, agradecer novamente a sua vinda e a palestra. Muito obrigado.
Obrigado, Hugo. Nós teremos mais uma mesa antes do almoço e nós estamos com um convênio com o Mercado 53 no shopping Passeio das Águas para as refeições nesses dias de SIIMI. Então, se alguém se interessar em aproveitar esse acordo que nós temos, basta pedir o cardápio exclusivo do SIIMI naquele restaurante. Para a próxima mesa, nós temos dois convidados especialíssimos, a professora Malu Fragoso, integrante do Grupo Nano da UFRJ, o professor Roberto Prado, do Grupo Poéticos Digitais da USP. E a gente encerra essa manhã com as falas voltadas para as produções artísticas de dois dos mais representativos grupos brasileiros de arte e tecnologia. Enquanto os computadores são conectados, eu gostaria somente de fazer um agradecimento especialíssimo ao grupo que esse ano faz 20 anos de existência, que não são velhinhos, nada, estão mandando muito bem, o grupo SIIMI Artes, que nos presenteia nessa edição com além de algumas comunicações com a apresentação do trabalho Metacampo, que está na exposição Singularidades, que abre hoje à noite. Eu gostaria de dizer o meu contentamento em tê-los aqui, principalmente de a gente poder comemorar juntos os 20 anos de iniciativa tão relevante para a produção em arte e tecnologia no Brasil. SIIMI, obrigado e parabéns pelos 20 anos.
Pode ir. Então, primeiro agradecer Mar pelo convite de estar aqui, agradecer a organização do evento, a Poli, todo mundo que está trabalhando com a gente e a pessoa que está dando apoio. Eu sei como isso tudo é importante, ao Media Lab. E, bom, eu vou falar rapidamente sobre um trabalho que vai ser exposto, que vai estar na exposição hoje, que abre hoje, então eu vou falar rapidamente, porque a gente não precisa entrar em muito detalhe. Então, meu nome é Maria Elisa Fragoso Malu, eu sou professora da Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro, do Departamento de Comunicação Visual e Design, sou coordenadora do MANO, do Núcleo de Arte de Novos Organismos, com o professor Gudinaldo, que está aqui também. Eu trouxe, aqui tem algumas imagens do nosso laboratório, e eu vou falar sobre um projeto que chama Chast, que eu estou me sentindo feito vocalista de banda, estou sempre cantando aquele mesmo hit, a cada ano melhora um pouquinho, então vamos lá no mesmo hit. Então, a nossa área de pesquisa envolve hibridação e biotelemática, né, a questão das comunicações digitalizadas e computacionais. A gente vem trabalhando com isso há já alguns anos. E um dos pontos altos do todo ano, do nosso trabalho, é fazer um evento que chama Interorgânicos, e nesse evento nós mostramos os nossos processos, as nossas obras, o trabalho que a gente vem realizando, convidamos outros artistas para participar desse trabalho, e são 3 dias, 3 dias de um laboratório aberto, e o último dia de simpósio, as pessoas falam sobre o que fizeram nesse laboratório. E aqui tem 2 imagens do laboratório realizado no Orgânicos do ano passado, que foi num prédio lindíssimo do século XIX, que chama Solar do Jambeiro, em Niterói. E durante esse evento nós mostramos o estágio atual do projeto Chast, que vocês vão ver na exposição. Então, o Chast é um sistema habitacional para abelhas sem teto, que tem como ideia, como premissa, desenvolver uma experiência artística, tecnológica, a partir de uma necessidade minha de trabalhar com recursos da natureza, com seres vivos que não são humanos e, de alguma maneira, desenvolver um processo de interação com esses seres dentro de questões sociais, ecológicas, de sustentabilidade que a gente vive hoje. Então, não estar distante do nosso mundo presente. Eu acho que tem muito a ver com as 2 falas que a gente ouviu aqui, né? Vai estar tudo na minha cabeça. Então, você tem o problema do desaparecimento das abelhas, isso já é uma história que eu contei várias vezes, elas são responsáveis por 70% da polinização dos nossos alimentos, o que quer dizer que sem elas nós vamos todos sucumbir. Então, nós temos problemas de abelhas nas cidades, e essa imagenzinha de baixo é o MIT tentando fazer uma abelha robô para substituir as abelhas que estão desaparecendo, para manter o Monsanto produzindo nossos alimentos. Aqui é o nosso sistema, um sistema composto de 3 etapas, uma etapa no apiário, onde você tem as abelhas monitoradas, o servidor do Nano, e os dados vão para o servidor, e o servidor eles vão para 2 outros pontos. Um sistema de captura de abelhas, que é para levar as abelhas das cidades para o campo, e o outro é o sistema de exposição, que a gente tem várias situações dessa exposição, para conscientizar as pessoas, o público, desse problema. Então, aqui estamos nós montando a caixa de monitoramento das abelhas. Isso aqui é um desenho simples do que é o sistema que está fazendo esse monitoramento, que está aí na exposição também. Aqui é uma imagem da gente fazendo a nossa gambiarra de monitorar abelhas na fazenda, no apiário. Aqui é um dos resultados que a gente teve no ano passado, que é uma caixa de acrílico que simula um protótipo de um espaço dispositivo com projeção dentro desse espaço de imagens que são visualização de dados que vêm direto desse monitoramento das abelhas. Esse protótipo foi exibido ano passado no SESC no Rio de Janeiro. Isso aqui é um detalhe da visualização dos dados, como que uma forma que a Bárbara Castro criou, e a partir dos dados que vêm das abelhas, esses módulos se movimentam como partículas. Depois vocês podem ver na exposição. Então nós caminhamos para um terceiro, uma outra possibilidade de percepção dessa relação com o apiário, que a gente chama de o chast móvel, que é dito de nós abelhas. De alguma maneira, nós nos tornamos abelhas dentro desse casulo de abelhas. Então, aqui é uma ideia inicial de como ele seria montado. Aí nós temos estudantes bolsistas de iniciação científica no Nano que estão trabalhando. Essa é a Mariná, é uma estudante de arquitetura, e ela veio com a ideia de se montar um abrigo a partir de origami. Também foi um outro projeto pela biosfera que a gente tem lá, e aí as coisas foram se misturando. Então nós acabamos desenvolvendo uma ideia, né, que ficou muito bacana, porque parece um casulo mesmo, que foi sendo trabalhado. Então aqui a gente fez, ao ampliar esse origami, a gente teve que fazer a dobradura com uma corte a laser, porque senão a gente ia ficar 3 anos fazendo isso. As experiências de encaixe, né, de uso desse material. Sobre o origami, nós temos essas 2 caixas. Uma delas contém, também foram impressas na laser, uma delas contém o sistema eletrônico, a outra contém um jardim, que é onde a gente tem um monitoramento do ambiente onde as abelhas estariam, que esse jardim faz referência à caixa de abelhas que está no apiário. Monitoramento de temperatura, de umidade, de luminosidade da colmeia. Então aqui já é o chast sendo montado no laboratório, e aqui já é a forma que ele ficou no último hiperorgânico, que é o que vocês vão ver daqui a pouco. Essa é uma visão de dentro, né, dele pendurado, e aqui já é uma visão de fora, como que a pessoa fica. Então ali dentro a gente tem uma percepção das abelhas, que estariam os dados que vêm do apiário. Aqui a gente já tem uma experiência que foi o Marlos Araújo e a Keimani Santana, ali a Bárbara Castro, que não dá para ver com a cabeça cortada. E o Marlos montou um dispositivo com os óculos Rift para você, com a mochila dele, para você poder ver essas formas. E aqui então já tem um desdobramento de sistema do chast, visto com os óculos Rift dentro do programa que o Manhã criou. E aí, semana passada, a nossa ideia é criar vários módulos dessas abelhas, cada um deles com uma reação diferente vinda do apiário. Um módulo onde a gente tenha mais relação sonora, traga os dados em forma de som, traga os dados em forma de movimento, em forma de luz, enfim, diferentes formas de interação. E na semana passada nós organizamos essa oficina com o pessoal da Bartlett, da University of London, e da área de arquitetura, e tinha uma base de robótica e de movimento. Bom, teve um curso de Arduino, teve várias etapas, E eles trouxeram uma ideia de fazer um músculo a partir de ar, que você, com compressão, compressor de ar, você cria com uma bexiga, você cria um movimento. Né? E aí nós conseguimos fazer algumas brincadeiras, que foi muito bacana, o Ensino Guto vai falar mais sobre isso, e aplicamos já aos primeiros partes do origami. Então eu queria botar o vídeo para vocês verem a próxima etapa, o próximo chat, ele vai se sambar. Vai ser ótimo. Então essa é... Foi incrível, né? Eu ainda estou namorando essa parte do processo. Bom, então eu vou encerrar por aqui, porque vocês vão ter a oportunidade de ver o trabalho e a gente pode conversar hoje, amanhã, e enfim, obrigada.
Obrigado, Manu.
Muito bom, você bateu o recorde. Deixa eu puxar você aqui. Você põe pra mim. Esse aqui. Vai.
A gente está transmitindo pela internet.
Você precisa usar o microfone?
Fica melhor, né?
Deixa eu achar aqui o tempo. Só tenho que achar onde é que está o negócio aqui. Projetar esse aqui. Tem esse sei que é que eu fiz. Vamos lá então? Vamos conversar com ele. Espera que eu vou. Bom, esse não está funcionando.
Só ligar.
O problema da gente é que a gente tem que ligar sempre, né? Deixa eu dar um on aqui. Ô, gente, obrigado Cleomar, pelo convite, estar aqui presente no SIIMI. Obrigado a todo mundo. É um prazer estar aqui. Então, como a Manu foi tão rápida, que eu estou desafiado a tentar fazer isso rápido também. Então, eu vou mudar a ordem do que eu tinha previsto. Eu vou apresentar de maneira bastante rápida um vídeo de um trabalho que eu acho que conversa de alguma maneira com os outros trabalhos e com o modus operandi que a gente vem trabalhando lá no grupo Poéticas Digitais, que eu sou coordenador. Então eu vou apresentar esse vídeo do trabalho que muitos de vocês conhecem, que é o trabalho Amoreiras. E, na verdade, as nossas ideias, quando a gente faz o trabalho, só para dizer, cada composição desses nossos trabalhos, ele tem participantes distintos. Né? Mas a ideia que está por trás de cada um desses trabalhos são ideias ou vontades, são elementos bastante simples. Nesse trabalho, o que a gente queria é que, de alguma maneira, as árvores que estão na rua, elas reagissem a toda essa poluição que está ali presente, simplesmente com chacoalhar das folhas, para que de alguma maneira, quando as árvores, quando essa poluição que está aí presente o tempo inteiro e a gente nunca está presente, muitas vezes a gente não está consciente do que está aí no nosso entorno, mas que quando essa poluição viesse, que de alguma maneira essas árvores chacoalhassem para tirar a poeira que está caindo nelas. Ou seja, no final do dia você faz uma espécie de dança eletrônica cibernética. Então vamos dar uma olhadinha no vídeo rápido, depois eu vou tentar mostrar alguns outros trabalhos rapidinho também.
Sur l'autonomie, l'apprentissage artificiel, la nature et l'environnement. Cinq nouveaux arbres ont été plantés sur la Luna Paulista, centre culturel et économique de São Paulo. Il est interdit de planter ces arbres en ville car ils polluent les rues, avec leurs feuilles qui tombent dans les bouches des rues et leurs fruits qui attirent les oiseaux. Et là, de manière indélébile des trottoirs, des voitures et des vêtements déplacés.
Então, para a gente ter uma ideia, o que ocorre? Todo esse ruído que está aqui passando, todo esse som, toda essa barulheira que está aqui nos invadindo agora, o que ela faz? De alguma maneira, o som é um representante, né, é um sintoma de toda essa poluição que está aqui.
Tout au long de la journée, les apprentis, peu à peu, acquièrent plus d'autonomie par rapport aux données reçues, dans une dense dialogue d'arbres, de prothèses et d'algorithmes, faisant apparaître sous forme poétique le balancement parfois involontaire mais chimique, parfois dû au propre vent dans leurs feuilles.
Então, cada uma dessas árvores, ela é tratada como um indivíduo. Então, ela é tratada de maneira independente. Cada uma delas recebe um nível, uma frequência diferente de som. Todo esse sinal ele é dividido em diferentes faixas. E cada uma dessas faixas vai de forma diferenciada para cada uma dessas árvores. Ou seja, por isso que cada uma dessas árvores, ela reage em um determinado momento. Et de manière différente.
Deux microphones captent le bruit ambiant. Ces bruits sont traités par un algorithme d'apprentissage artificiel qui détermine comment chacun des arbres se comportera. L'ordinateur communique par des cartes Arduino via Bluetooth. Celle-ci contrôle les moteurs qui actionnent les branches grâce aux tiges, secouant la poussière qui se dépose sur leurs feuilles.
Sacudir a memória dos nossos quintais esquecidos, dos nossos quintais que a gente deixou para trás, nas nossas infâncias. Eba! Então acabou esse, então rapidinho eu vou aproveitar, gente. Aqui vai ter que ser rápido. O maluco foi, eu também vou tentar ser. Vamos lá, eu vou apresentar então alguns outros trabalhos. Então, aqui do grupo. Vamos lá. Esse microfone. Eu não posso mexer. Bom, então vamos lá, daqui a gente vai rapidinho pular para onde? Vamos para o norte do Brasil, vamos para o Amazonas. Então eu vou mostrar que é uma outra questão que para a gente que está muito presente, quando a gente faz esse trabalho, tem uma questão que está sempre presente por trás dela, que é a questão dessas forças invisíveis que a gente tem aí o tempo inteiro. A gente fala de celular, que está aí presente, todas essas forças de energia que elas estão presentes o tempo inteiro, esses fluxos, e a gente nem sempre consegue perceber isso, não é? Então, uma questão que há bastante tempo ela me toca, que é a questão dessas linhas, que são linhas que às vezes elas estão presentes na própria natureza, como por exemplo a linha do do próprio Equador. Que era uma pergunta que eu me fazer aos nossos amigos aqui também. Quando a gente muda de, digamos, hemisfério, do hemisfério norte para o hemisfério sul, todo mundo sabe, né, que tem a questão do vórtice, né? O vórtice ele gira para um lado, e quando a gente passa esse outro lado, quando a gente vem aqui para o sul, né, que é o carro onde nós estamos agora, o hemisfério, ele gira no sentido completamente oposto. Então a questão que eu sempre colocava é, o que será que vai acontecer uma vez que o nosso corpo ele é composto na sua grande totalidade de líquidos, né? O que será que acontece com a gente o tempo inteiro, quando a gente fica mudando de um lado para o outro? O que acontece, que é a grande questão que eu me coloco enquanto artista, essa é a minha questão maior enquanto artista, se eu tivesse com um pé na linha do próprio Equador, né, e com o pé de um lado e com o pé do outro, o que vai acontecer com o meu corpo, em que situação eu vou, digamos, encontrar? Então, essa é a situação em que eu me coloquei aí, que tem um fenômeno lá no Rio Amazonas que se chama Encontro das Águas, onde vocês podem ver quando os rios Solimões ele se junta com o Rio Negro, esse Rio Solimões e o Rio Negro, você tem uma grande faixa de mais ou menos 6 quilômetros, onde essas águas elas não se misturam. Isso é um fenômeno extremamente interessante. Então o que eu fiz? Eu estava lá com um grupo, a gente estava fazendo um trabalho, aí vocês podem ver ali realmente esse fenômeno, olha que existe, é um fenômeno belíssimo. E o que eu fiz imediatamente? Eu fui lá e pum, pulei na água. O capitão enlouqueceu, não pode pular na água, você tá louco, como é que vai pular? Claro que eu estava com boia. De qualquer maneira, essa sensação, eu queria colocar o meu corpo aí no meio, sentir o que era eu estar no lado dessa faixa, que é uma faixa, né, nesse caso é uma faixa visível, é legal a gente, diferente da linha do próprio Equador, onde é uma linha imaginária, sempre essa linha também é uma linha imaginária, mas de qualquer maneira ela tem uma certa fisicalidade. Então é o maior tesão do mundo, é uma delícia você estar mergulhado em uma água que você está metade de um lado, metade de outro, e claro, com todo o perigo que tem aí, porque esse rio é muito grande, a gente não pode ficar brincando com ele. E vamos aí, então a questão toda, eu me joguei embaixo d'água toda aí vocês estão vendo, a gente pegando algumas imagens do que seria essa possível linha imaginária, né? O que é estar de um lado e estar do outro nessa simultaneidade. E aí está aí, então você entra na água e você não sabe mais aonde você está, de que lado você está, de que lado que está o seu corpo, porque a diferença daquilo é uma diferença de densidades, é uma diferença de temperatura. Então é um grande barato você colocar o seu corpo de um lado mais frio, de um lado mais denso, de outro menos frio, então você está naquele negócio todo, nessa passagem entre esses dois rios, e poeticamente é lindo, porque depois é a partir desse momento que a gente vai ter o que é chamado o Rio Amazonas. Mas vamos embora. Então é o que a gente pegou a palavra encontros em diversas línguas, né? Porque a questão toda é essa, de que encontros que nós estamos falando, se a gente não realmente misturar diversas línguas ou diversas leituras do que significa essa questão do que é encontro. Se eu falar em encontro em português, daí que eu fiz a questão, e vocês discutem de passar aquele primeiro vídeo, que ele está em português, francês e inglês. Como o encontro também está em 3 línguas, eu resolvi usar aquela versão do vídeo, que foi exatamente brincar com isso, sobre esses encontros, essas hibridizações. Então o tempo inteiro a gente está hibridizando. Mas hibridizando como? Né? Bom, então vamos lá. Então a ideia desse, digamos, trabalho era o seguinte: em um celular desse lado aqui, você tem a variação da cor da água do rio, ela vai transformando, e depois você tem a cor da água do rio que é mais escura, que vai sendo transformada à medida que as pessoas vão em tempo real acessando a palavra encontros em diferentes línguas. Então isso faz com que esse motorzinho mexa com esse celular, desse lado aqui. Desse outro lado, você tem o que a própria força da natureza coloca, que é a variação das marés. Conforme as marés elas vão subindo, elas vão descendo, essa variação ela vai ocorrendo. Quer dizer, então, essa daqui trabalha com a força e com o tempo da própria natureza. Então, isso é uma outra coisa que vocês vão ver em todos os trabalhos que a gente faz, é essa relação do tempo. Não tem essa loucura de interatividade a toda hora, de esse ritmo frenético, mas não, é deixar que a própria natureza nos fale um pouco do ritmo dela também, que vai estar em contraposição com esse outro movimento, que é o movimento do próprio homem. E o que é mais legal aqui, que é interessante, que a gente tem uma mola. que liga esses dois elementos aqui. O que essa mola faz? Essa mola ela faz o balanço entre essas energias, o balanço entre essas forças. Porque a partir do momento que eu mexo esse lado aqui, né, imediatamente, do jeito geral, eu vou mexer esse outro lado aqui também. Então, o que vai acontecer? De um lado eu tenho a água que é mais escura, do outro lado eu tenho a água que é mais clara, que ela é mais marrom e preto. Né? Então, esses dois vídeos eles vão sendo mudados, eles vão se transformando. Eles vão transformando, eles vão se aproximando. À medida em que esses dados vão sendo acessados. Então eles vão se aproximando, até um momento máximo em que você consegue transformá-los. Somente nesse último estágio, nesse último momento, essas duas cores de água elas vão se misturar. É o único momento onde esse marrom e o preto vão se mesclar. Mas ao mesmo tempo, essa mesma mola que colocou os dois juntos é a mesma mola que fisicamente impede que esse encontro aconteça. Então, nesse último momento, nessa única posição, que eles vão se misturam, olham um para o outro e se abrem de novo e o ciclo recomeça. Então, são desses breves momentos em que a gente está aí falando e dessa questão, dessa própria possibilidade desse nosso encontro. E aí está aí a peça, né, é o trabalho que foi trabalhado, sempre tem essa questão híbrida, uma festarina numa madeira de 150 anos, enfim, tem toda uma história de construção desse próprio objeto, que é sempre uma questão de alta e descer ou baixa tecnologia para mim. É sempre essa questão dessa hibridização desses elementos aí. Então, aqui vocês estão vendo aqui, pelo próprio slide, você não dá para ver as marés passando ali, o rio. E aqui foi agora no ano passado, na Bienal de Mídia lá em Wrocław, lá na Polônia. Então é um belo objeto também. E além de tudo tem essa relação poética. Então, para mim é muito mais interessante resgatar esses elementos, né, e trabalhar todas essas questões. Se der tempo, eu apresento mais um outro, pode ser? Rapidinho, então vamos embora, gente. Vamos lá para o segundo, vamos lá. Correio. Esse chama a Caixa dos Horizontes Possíveis, esse inclusive a Malu participou também, entre outros. A gente foi convidado para intervir num espaço que chama Passo das Artes em São Paulo. Infelizmente esse espaço já agora pertence ao Instituto Butantan. Quer dizer, essa história. Mas o grupo ele foi convidado a intervir dentro desse espaço aqui. E ao invés de fazer o que normalmente as pessoas fazem, o que a gente resolveu fazer, ou seja, utilizar esse espaço para que a gente explore alguma coisa. Aqui está a Renata, uma amiga do grupo, ela está aí servindo enquanto escala, para a gente entender o espaço. Mas a gente resolveu fazer uma outra coisa, que seja fugir desse cubo branco e integrar o cubo dentro de uma outra relação, fazer com que esse cubo ele se expandisse para outras situações. Então vamos lá? Então a ideia do que foi? Então ao invés de a gente resolveu fechar o espaço e fazer de conta do que a gente tirasse esses horizontes, que é o nome do trabalho, Caixa dos Horizontes Possíveis, de maneira que quando você estivesse circulando em torno dessa peça, você estivesse vendo os diferentes horizontes no espaço. Puta, está muito ruim essa imagem aqui, ficou ruim. Mas aqui, o que a gente fez? A gente pegou aquele espaço e a gente expandiu. Aqui vocês vão ver a América do Sul de ponta cabeça. Porque o que a gente estourou? A gente fez daqui para que aqui a caixa expandida. E a gente fez com que cada uma daquelas laterais daquele cubo fosse dado, a gente tivesse diferentes horizontes. Ou seja, de um lado a gente tinha a São Sebastião Bay, do outro lado Guamaré, ou seja, em cada um dos lados a gente tem um diferente horizonte que vai variando durante o dia. Então, ou seja, enquanto de um lado, enquanto é dia, né, em um daqueles lados, em outro dia eu ainda tenho o dia que não nasceu ainda. E assim vai se passando. Então você tem aqui uma relação desses 4 horizontes possíveis que vão passando durante todo o dia. Então, existem momentos em que você vai entrar para ver o espaço, para ver aquele trabalho, o que vai acontecer? Você vai ter o mesmo horizonte, como se aquela caixa ela fosse o único, digamos, objeto de todos aqueles horizontes, eles são iguais. Então, todos esses trabalhos e os outros também têm essa relação do tempo do próprio acontecimento. Então, muitas vezes, para você entender esse trabalho, você vai ter que voltar em vários momentos diferentes, só aqueles momentos de passagem. Onde, por exemplo, aqui um lado escureceu, então você tem aqui o pôr do sol de um lado, mas em outro lado, em outro horizonte da caixa, você tem uma outra situação. Então, quando você está dando volta naquela caixa, naquele outro objeto, é como se você estivesse dando uma volta pelo mundo, por toda a América, e ver esses diferentes nasceres e morreres do sol. Então, aí vocês estão vendo a peça, a hora que ela está feita. Aí, rapidinho, eu só vou mostrar alguns momentos dessa construção que a gente fez de maneira como que ela ficasse, como que essa caixa de dentro ela ficasse suspensa e você não percebesse essa borda aqui. Então, o seu olhar passava direto por essas bordas porque ela estava suspensa pelo próprio meio dela, né? Então a gente está fazendo o trabalho, né, com alguns membros do grupo. Então o que era bonito era isso, que esses horizontes, além de ter essas cores distintas, você atravessava o olhar. Então esses vértices, esses pontos dessa caixa, eles faziam essa relação de luz que era uma soma desses diferentes horizontes, né? Então o que era lindo é que inclusive essa luz vazava, né? Está aí a Manu também. Essa luz vazava e essa luz ela trazia, né, a gente para essa outra possibilidade. Então o Sérgio e a Luciana programando, e aí a gente dentro da caixa com todo o sistema que a gente construiu. Vamos. Então só algumas outras imagens. Mais uma. Então, o que era bonito fazer nesse daqui. Então, você vazava pelos pontos e você não viu o final. Então, você atravessava o olhar também, a sua luz era construída aí. E talvez essa foi a melhor imagem de todas. É esse menino nesse desespero, nesse levantar o pé, ele tentando, né, buscar esse, digamos, horizonte, ele tentando encontrar a luz que vinha dali, que estava saindo, que estava construindo. E eu vou parar por aqui, porque acho que o tempo já deu. Então, obrigado, gente.
Obrigadíssimo, Gilberto. O Gilberto continua aqui com a gente, tanto quanto Malu, então teremos a oportunidade ímpar de conversar com eles nos intervalos. E em função do nosso avanço, eu não vou abrir para perguntas agora, vocês fiquem à vontade para abordá-los depois, e a gente parte para o almoço. Às 2 horas nós retomamos no espaço do Media Lab e também aqui com as comunicações do nosso simpósio. Por essa manhã e pela atenção, muitíssimo obrigado. Assim, nós estamos com um hotspot aqui para Wi-Fi, que é o SIIMI 2016, e a senha é Media Lab 2016. Ou é SIIMI? Só SIIMI.
E a senha Media Lab 2016, exclamação. Tem que colocar lá.
Ah, tá. Então nós vamos colocar lá.
Você vai fazer o almoço? Não sei, eu acho que é agora, mas eu tenho que...
Transmitir através de algum